Good morning. Oops. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good morning. Get into a comfortable seating position. Alrighty, guys and girls and boys and girls. Today, we're gonna read a book that is not Kazuo Ishiguro, not Natsume Soseki, because I borrowed some books from my friend last year and I still haven't returned to her, and one of the book is this book, the Inugami Curse, and I really want to return it back to her. So what I want to do is just finish reading this book and then return the book to her. Then I can start doing my Kazuo Ishiguro and Natsume Soseki book reading session. Basically, most of the time will be Kazuo Ishiguro and Natsume Soseki, because I still have a lot actually, not a few, Kazuo Ishiguro books that I haven't read. I still have some from Natsume Soseki, and there will be more coming. A couple more Natsume Soseki's books coming, because Book Depository is closing down, and that was the only place that I can find Natsume Soseki books. If any of you know where I can get Natsume Soseki books translated into English, please let me know. I think I still have a few, like a couple of them. His last book, Light and Dark, which is not which is unfinished, but it was still translated and released. I wanted to get it on Books Depository, but it was like really expensive for me, so I couldn't afford it, because I wanted also to buy a Basho complete haiku of Basho's book, which was expensive, but still under my budget. So yeah, I spent a bit money on buying 3 books at Books Depository before they closed down on the 26th this month. So just so you know, Books Depository, the online bookstore that sells books without shipping fee, they are closing down on the 26th of this month. RIP, IP, RIP in peace. Thank you, Amazon, for doing such a good thing to us, motherfuckers. Yeah. So, anyway, putting up my lip balm, because I always forget. I actually woke up on time today. I had time to make coffee and make breakfast and eat my breakfast. So you don't have to listen to me chewing my bread today. Ha ha ha! Isn't that great? Okay, so we have Dian here today. We have Tuna here today. I think it's sufficient enough for me to start reading. Hopefully there will be more coming in to join us today. It's a bit of a different book. I would say style as well. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, I have never written any. I've never read, not written. I've never read anything from Seishi Yokomizo, so I don't know how his writing is. But this is a classic Japanese murder mystery, so I don't think I've ever read something like this before, so it will be interesting. I hope it's not as boring as the modern Japanese writers are. Modern Japanese writers have a formula that they follow. It's like they always do this. Main character is a underdog. Nobody care about this underdog character, but somehow they have this magical thing that they can do magical stuff. Like Lonely in the Castle can go through the mirror and go into the castle, meet other people from all around the around Japan or world. And achieve something together, learn something through the experience, through the magical experience. Sweet Bean Pace, a very normal underdog character who went to jail before and and met a old lady who has this super ability to make sweet bean paste for his dorayaki. And then after that, he learned his lesson, like, oh, how he can be a better dorayaki maker, like, have a purpose in life, that kind of thing. And then you have fucking, yeah, I'm not gonna like rant anymore. Modern Japanese writers have a formula that they follow, and it's very boring. Lonely Castle in the Sky, I remember I almost fell asleep reading that one. Yeah, this is why I prefer older Japanese writers. Modern Japanese writer, they really have a formula. The only modern Japanese writer that I enjoy is Confession by Kanae Minato. And as much as I like Kanae Minato's Confession, um, I don't even like the second book, Penance, that I read from her. Like, it was good, but it was just way too meh for me, I guess. Anyway, shut the fuck up, Nuna, and start reading. Um, Today we are reading The Inugami Curse by Seishi Yokomizo, a classic Japanese murder mystery. So, a little information about the author. Seishi Yokomizo, born 1902, died in 1981, was one of Japan's most famous and best-loved mystery writers. He was born in Kobe and spent his childhood reading detective stories before beginning to write stories of his own. The first, which was published in 1921, he went on to become an extremely prolific and popular author, best known for his Kosuke Kindaichi series, which ran to 77 books. Oh my god. Many of which were adapted for stage and television in Japan. The Inugami Curse is the second Kosuke Kindaichi story, and perhaps the most famous, having been adapted for film and television numerous times in Japan. The Honjin Murders is also available from this publisher. Pushkin Vertigo. Seishi Yokomizo, Inugami Curse, translated from Japanese by Yumiko Yamazaki. I try to separate it into 3 parts, so we have 3 days of reading, but we'll see, okay? Inugami ke no ichizoku. Inugami ke no ichizoku. Alright. I don't know why, but there's a character list, so I'm just gonna read it. Sahe Inugami, a wealthy and eccentric businessman, the head of the Inugami clan. Daini Nonomiya, the former priest of Nasu Shrine. Haruyo Nonomiya, Dani's wife. I didn't know. Oh, okay. It's a former priest. Tamayo Nonomiya, the granddaughter of Daini and Haruyo Nonomiya. Matsuko Inugami, Sahe's eldest daughter. Kiyo Inugami, Matsuko's son. Takeko Inugami, Sahe's second daughter. Toranosuke Inugami, Takeko's husband. Take Inugami, son of Takeko and Toranosuke. Sayoko Inugami, the daughter of Takeko and Toranosuke and the younger sister of Take. Umeko Inugami, Sahe's third daughter. Kokichi Inugami, Umeko's husband. Tomo Inugami, the son of Umeko and Kokichi. Kyozo Furudate, the Inugami clan's attorney. Kosuke Kindaichi, a private investigator. Toyoichiro Wakabayashi, a lawyer at the Furudate law office. Monkey, Tamayo's friend and bodyguard. Who is Tamayo again? Granddaughter of Daini and Haruyo Nonomiya. Kikuno Aonuma, Sahe, former mistress. Shizuma Aonuma, Kikuno's son. Daisuke Oyama, the priest of Nasu Shrine. Chief Tachibana, the chief of Nasu Police Department. Kokin Miyakawa, Matsuko's koto teacher. It's very confusing so far. There's many characters. Basically, if you notice something, is that Sahe has three daughters, and all of their husbands has taken on their wives. The wife's surname, which is Inugami. So usually this kind of thing happen when the wife's family is more prominent and more rich, wealthy than the husband's. So basically the husband married into the family and taken their surname. That's usually how it is. Imagine this is like feudal, not feudal, but like old, like old Japan, and they are doing this kind of thing, but they are like Westerners who are like flipping the fuck out when their son or their whatever, or their brother take the, or anyone like a man taking a woman's surname. There's always an outrage over there for some reason. But you see, like feudal Japan doesn't give a shit. Like if the wife's family is more prominent and wealthy, they are going to take their surname. Fuck you guys. Hello. Hello. Oh my god, this is weird. Hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, that was. It's not my internet. I thought my internet crashed, or the game crashed, but it turns out to be OBS. It's an OBS problem. I'm sorry. Gomenasai. OBS, OBS, OBS. Oh wait. OBS, OBS, OBS. Okay, 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 okay. Okay, okay, we're gonna start again. The tale begins, Chapter 1. In February 1940s, Sahe Inugami, one of the leading businessmen of the Shinshu region, the founder of the Inugami Group, and the so-called Silk King of Japan, died at his lakeside villa in Nasu at the venerable age of 81. After his death, the rags to riches tale of this self-made man, already related over several decades in various newspaper and magazine articles, was published by the Inugami Foundation on its most detailed version to date. According to this book, The Life of Sahe Inugami, Sahe was orphaned at a young age and drifted to the Lake Nasu region where he was 17. He had no idea where he had been born, who his parents were, or even whether his unusual surname, literally dog god, had been inherited from his ancestors and conferred by someone with a fertile imagination. Most men embellish their family trees when they become when they become rich or famous, but Sahi Inugami made no attempts to do so. We are all born without a stitch on our backs, was his constant declaration to those around him. Until I turned 17, I was like a pauper, drifting from place to place, he would say without hesitation. It was only when I found my way to Nasu and Mr. Nonomiya took me in and that fortune finally smiled on me. Daini Nonomiya was the priest of Nasu's shrine and a Shinto complex that graced the shores of Lake Nasu. Sahe felt he owed him a lifelong debt, so etched in his mind was Daini's generosity that usually bold and arrogant Sahe would usually sit up straight in a humble respect whenever Nonomiya's name was mentioned. Yet, while his unchanging gratitude and devotion to the priest family was certainly commendable, Sahe failed to realize that everything, even gratitude, has a limit that should not be exceeded, and that his excessive gratitude towards the Nonomiya family would embroil his own kin in a series of bloody murders after his death. Let it be a lesson to us all that even good intentions can lead to great tragedy if not executed with the utmost care. When the two men first met, young Sahe was, as he later recounted, an indigent drifter. One day, he lay exhausted under the raised floor of the worship hall of Nasu Shrine. It was late autumn and impossible to live without the heat in this bitterly cold lakeside region, but Sahe was dressed only in the flimsiest rags tied around him by a rope, and he had barely eaten anything for 3 days. Starved and freezing, he knew he was dying. In fact, if Daini had found him any later, Sahe probably would have died there like a dog. Astounded to discover a young pauper beneath the floorboards of the worship hall, Daini carried him back to his house so his wife Haruyo could tend to him, and thus began the unusual relationship between the two men. According to the life of Sahe Inugami, Daini was 42 at the time, while Haruyo was a young woman of 22. Sahe would later say that she was as kind-hearted as a saint and as lovely as an angel. Sahe had a naturally sturdy constitution, and thanks to the couple's generous ministrations, he soon recovered completely. Daini, however, did not wish to see him go, and learning that Sahe's wretched circumstances, and urged him to stay. Because Sahe, too, was loath to leave the warm nest he had found, he continued to live with the priest of Nasu Shrine and his wife, not quite a freeloader, but not quite a servant. Realizing that Sahe never had spent a day of his life in school and was totally illiterate, Daini took him under his wing and educated him diligently, like a father would a son. Why did Daini so lavish his attentions on Sahe? True, he may have perceived the future that Sahe's sharp intelligence promised, but there is said to have been another, darker reason, not mentioned even in the life of Sahe Inugami. Sahe was an extraordinarily handsome young man. He was radiantly handsome and would retain traces of the attractiveness even in his declining years. Because of this youthful radiance, Daini was drawn to Sahe. People whispered of a homosexual relationship between them and pointed out that Haruyo, as soft-hearted and understanding as she was, left Daini a little more than a year after Sahe's arrival and returned to her parents' home for a time. Daini, as rumor had it, was so infatuated with Sahe that he completely ignored her. After Sahe found other lodgings, however, the rift between husband and wife appeared to be mended, and Haruyo soon returned. Perhaps the couple grew closer, for Haruyo gave birth to a daughter, Noriko, several years later. Noriko eventually married and was blessed with a daughter she named Tamayo, one of the principals of our tales. After leaving Daini's home, Sahe, with the priest's help, found employment at a small silk mill. Who would have guessed that from this humble beginning he would eventually establish the Inugami Group, one of Japan's leading business enterprises? Smart and quick, Sahe mastered in 1 year what it took others several years to learn. Moreover, although he had left Daini's house, he had remained a frequent visitor, and the priest continued to enrich Sahe's mind, gradually transforming him into an educated and cultured man. Even Haruyo, who had left her husband once on account of Sahe, must have come to terms with her feelings, for she is said to have treated him like a brother, busily seeing to his needs whenever he visited. The Japanese raw silk industry was in its infancy when Sahe was first employed at the silk mill in 1887. He soon understood the organization of the mill and the how-tos of selling raw silk, and when he decided to strike out on his own, it was Daini Nonomiya who provided him with the necessary capital. Sahe's business grew by leaps and bounds. As Japan became more powerful during the years of the Sino-Japanese War, the Russo-Japanese War, and the World War I, raw silk became a major export item, and the Inugami Silk Company was solidly established as a top-ranking business enterprise. Daini Nonomiya, died in 1911 at the age of 68. Although he had been the first to finance Sahei's business, he had steadfastly refused to accept any share of the Inugami Group's enormous profits. No matter how much Sahe protested, Daini would accept only the amount that he originally invested, plus a bit of interest. The priest led a life that of noble poverty to the end. Soon after Daini's death, Sahe found a suitable husband for Noriko, a man who would marry into the Nonomiya family and succeed Daini as a priest of Nasu Shrine. For a long time, Noriko and her husband were childless, but in 1924, more than 10 years after they wed, they were blessed with a daughter they named Tamayo. Both Noriko and her husband, however, died before Tamayo reached age of 20. And because of Tamayo's grandmother Haruyo had died before she was born, the young woman found herself with no one to turn to. Sahe therefore brought her into the Inugami household, seeing to it that this orphan daughter from the family of his revered master and mentor was treated with courtesy due to a special guest. Sahe himself, for some unknown reason, never married. He sired three children, three daughters, all with different women, none of whom he made his legal wife. His three daughters married and had children of their own, with each bridegroom marrying into the Inugami clan, taking on the family name and being appointed manager of one of the company's offices. The husband of the eldest daughter, Matsuko, was placed in charge of the Nasu head office, that of the second daughter, Takeko, the Tokyo branch office, and the third youngest daughter, Umeko, the Kobe branch office. Until the day he died, however, Sahe refused to hand over all the powerful helm of the Inugami group to any of his son-in-laws. On February 18, 1940-something, the members of the Inugami clan were gathered around the dying Sahe. Matsuko, the eldest daughter, was in her early 50s and at the time led the most solitary life of all members of the clan. Her husband has died a few years before, and her only son, Kyo, had not yet returned from the war. He was alive, she knew, for he had written to her from Burma soon after the war ended, but she had no idea when he would be allowed to come back home. Kyo was the only of the Sahe three grandsons who was not present on this day. Next to Matsuko sat the second daughter, Takeko, her husband, Toranosuke, and their children, Take and Sayoko. Take was 28 and her sister, Sayoko, was 22. Behind them were Sahe's youngest daughter, Umeko, and her husband, Kokichi, and their only son, Tomo, who was only a year younger than Take. These 9 people, the 8 present, plus the absent Kyo, were Sahe's relations, making up the entire Inugami clan. There was, however, another person, a person whose fate was closely intertwined with Sahe's, who kept watch by his deathbed. This was Nonomiya's family's sole surviving member, Tamayo. She was 26. Everyone sat silently, listening to the old man's breathing become weaker and weaker. Strangely, they saw no trace of grief at the loss at losing a loved one. Not only there was no grief, but impatience, terrible impatience about something, was written on the faces of all except Tamayo, as they sat wondering, guessing, and conniving to find out what the others had in mind. Whenever they looked away from the old man, who was sinking fast, their eyes would invariably dart over the faces of the others. Oh my god. It was the ignorance of Sahe's intention that was causing their impatience. Who would take over the huge Inugami group after the old man's death? How would his enormous fortune be divided? He had never given any indication of his wishes. Then too, there was a particular reason for their irritation and anxiety. Sahe, for unknown reasons, had never felt any love for his daughters, and what was more, had not an ounce of faith in any of their husbands. As the doctor took his pulse, Sahe's breathing weakened further still. Unable to restrain herself any longer, Matsuko leaned forward Any last words, father? Any last words for us? Sahe must have heard her voice, and for his eyes opened slightly. Father, if you have any last wishes, please tell us. We all want to hear what you have to say. He must have understood Matsuko's true meaning, for the old man smiled faintly and pointed his trembling finger at a man seated at the far end of the room. Indicated thus by Sahe, Kyozo Furudate, the Inugami clan's attorney, coughed softly and said, I have Mr. Inugami's last will and testament in my safekeeping, he said. Furudate's statement exploded like a bomb in the hush scene of impending death, everyone except Tamayo turned in shock towards the lawyer. So there's a will, Toranosuke gasped softly. Flustered, he took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his brow, wet with perspiration even in the February cold. And when is this will to be read? As soon as the chief is dead? Kokichi, too, could not conceal his impatience. When Kiyo has returned, muttered Take, an uneasy look on his face. I hate to say it, but what if Kiyo doesn't make it back? At Takeko's words, Matsuko shot a menacing glare at her half-sister. Takeko's right, chimed in Umeko. He might be alive, but he's so far off in Burma. Who knows what could have happened before he reaches Japan? There was venom in her voice, as if she cared not at all about Matsuko's feelings. Well, should that be the case, the lawyer said, clearing his throat softly. I am authorized to read the will on the first anniversary of Mr. Inugami's death. Until then, the Inugami Foundation will be entirely in charge of managing all Inugami's businesses and the estate. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. On everyone's face, everyone's, that is, except Tamayo's, there was restlessness, apprehension, and a certain hostility. Even Matsuko stared at the old man's face with a mixture of hope, anxiety, and expectation and hate. Sahe, however, continued to lie with a faint smile on his lips. Opening wide his eyes, which could no longer focus clearly, he looked one by one of the faces of Matsuko and the other members of his clan. Finally, his gaze reaches Tamayo and stopped. The doctor, who had been taking Sahe's pulse, solemnly proclaimed him dead. That was the end of the life of Sahe Inugami, the end of his 81 turbulent years. In hindsight, we now know that his death set in motion the blood-soaked series of events that later befell the Inugami clan. That was the end of chapter 1. It's very interesting so far. I like it. Let us continue. Chapter 2. A woman of extraordinary beauty. On October 18, 8 months after Sahe's death, a man checked into the lakeside Nasu Inn. He was, to put it mildly, of less than impressive appearance, mid-30s, slightly built, with an unruly mop of hair, and wearing an unfashionable serge kimono and white-legged pleated hakama trousers, both very wrinkled and worn, and he had a slight tendency to stutter. Or like me. The name he wrote in the guest register was Kosuke Kindaichi. Those who have read of Kindaichi exploits in the series of chronicles that begin with the Honjin murders are, of course, already familiar with him. For those readers who have yet to meet him, I will briefly introduce him. Kosuke Kindaichi is a private investigator. He has what can be described as an inscrutable air, seeming, as he does, to float above worldly cares and desires. Physically, he is a stammering, inconsequential fellow with nothing to commend him, but his remarkable faculty for reasoning and deduction has been attested to the cases of her Honjin murders, Gokumon Island, and Hatsuhaka village. When he is excited, his stuttering is aggravated, and he tends to scratch his tousled-haired head with a frightful vigor. It is not a very pleasant habit. Shown by the maid into the second floor tatami mat room, commanding a view of the lake, Kindaichi immediately pick up the phone and ask the operator for an outside line. Sorry. Yes, an hour then. That's fine. I'll be waiting for you. He hung up and glanced back at the maid. I'm expecting someone in an hour. When he comes and asks for me, please show him to this room. My name? Kindaichi. After a quick soak in the inn's bath, Kindaichi returned to his room. Then, with a frown forming on his face, he took a book and a letter from his suitcase. The book was The Life of Sahe Inugami, which has been published by the Inugami Foundation the previous month. The letter was from a man named Tochihiro Wakabayashi of the Furudate Law Office in Nasu. Kindaichi pulled a chair onto the balcony overlooking the lake and began leafing through the pages of the book, obviously much read book. Soon, laying the book aside, he took the letter from the envelope and began rereading its extraordinary contents. Dear Mr. Kindaichi, it is with tremendous regret that I, who have not yet had the pleasure of your acquaintance, am disturbing you with this unexpected correspondence, but there is something that I absolutely must request of you. My request involved the surviving family of none other than Sahe Inugami, whose biography I have taken upon myself to send to you under separate cover. I am extremely concerned that the Inugami clan will be faced with a grave situation in the near future. By grave situation, I mean events soaked in blood, the sort of events which I believe are your specialty. One family member after another falling victim. When I think of this, I cannot sleep at night. In fact, it is not a situation that might occur in the future. It is already occurring this very minute. If we ignored it, I have no idea what a terrible catastrophe it could lead to. Therefore, although I realize the impertinence of my request, I am writing to bid you to come to Nasu and to conduct an investigation into this matter so as to prevent such tragedy. When you read this letter, you will probably doubt my sanity, but let me assure you, I am not insane. It is not because of insanity, but from the utmost anxiety, dread, and terror that I am imploring you for help. If upon your arrival you will please phone me at the Furudate Law Office number shown on the envelope, I will come to see you immediately. On bended knees, I beseech you not to ignore my request. Best regards, Toyoichiro Wakabayashi. P.S. Please keep the contents of this letter strictly confidential. The letter was awkwardly written, as if someone used to writing in formal epistolary style was trying hard to adopt colloquial tone. When he had first received it, even Kindaichi, who was really perturbed, could not help but be stunned. I am not insane, the correspondent had written, but everything indicated otherwise. Kindaichi had even considered the possibility of a practical joke. The words events soaked in blood and one family after another falling victim meant that the writer was anticipating a series of murders. But if so, how could he know that? Someone planning a murder would not divulge such a secret, and besides, murder is not something that can be carried out so easily, even if one has formed a plan to do so. The writer's strong confidence that the impending murders were certain to occur made him sound a little crazy. Assume, then, that such a plan did exist and this Wakabayashi had somehow found out about it. Why not then inform the potential victims? Even if he found Even if he found difficult to go to the police when no crime had yet been, com- been committed, he could surely whisper it confidentially to those unfortunate enough to be the intended victims. If for some reasons he could not tell them in person, he could use some other means, an anonymous letter, for instance. At first, therefore, Kindaichi had considered just laughing off the letter, but a certain sentence had left him vaguely uneasy. Quote, in fact, it is not a situation that might occur in the future. It is already occurring this very minute. Did the writer mean that some sinister event had already been transpired? Kindaichi had also been struck by how Wakabayashi seemed to work for a law office, indicating that he was probably an attorney or trainee, a person who might indeed be in a position to uncover a family secret and detect a murder plot. For those reasons, Kindaichi had studied the letter repeatedly, then read the copy of The Life of Saihei Inugami that Wakabayashi had sent. His interest had instantly been aroused by the book's description of the complex family circumstances surrounding this Inugami clan. Kindaichi already knew that the old Saihei Inugami had died in early spring, but when he recalled having learned somewhere that the reading of Saihei's will was being postponed until one of his grandsons was repatriated, his curiosity grew even more. So Kindaichi has scurried to finish the case that had been occupying him at the time, and with a suitcase in his hand, he had appeared suddenly in Nasu. With the letter and book in his lap, Kindaichi was abstractedly mulling over the situation when the maid entered his room bringing tea. "Oh, miss! Kindaichi hastily stopped her, for she had turned to go as soon as she has placed the cup of tea on the table. "Where is the Inugami estate?" "Oh, you can see it over there." Looking to where the maid pointed, Kindaichi saw several blocks from the inn a handsome cream-colored European-style villa and a Japanese-style building topped by a roof with intricate confusion of angles. The backyard extended all the way to the lake and was connected with its waters by a large sluice. "I see. A grand mansion indeed. By the way, I read that one of Mr. Inugami's grandson hasn't returned from the war yet. Has anything happened since? Is there no word yet?" "Actually, they said that Mr. Kiyo had arrived in Hakata the other day. His mother was overjoyed, of course, and she has gone to fetch him. I heard they are staying at their house in Tokyo right now, and that they are coming to Nasu in a few days." "Oh, so he's back in Japan." The timing of this new turn of event made Kindaichi hearts race. Just then, the sluice gate of the Inugami estate slid silently upward, and a rowboat glided out onto the lake. In it was a lone figure, a young woman. A man ran onto the berm outside the gate as if to see her off, and they exchanged a few words, but she waved goodbye and the man shuffled back inside the gate. The woman rowed smoothly, pulling the oars with accomplished strokes. She was clearly enjoying herself. "Is that woman one of the Inugamis?" asked Kindaichi. "Oh, that's Miss Tamayo," the maid replied. "No, she's not a family member, but I heard that she's related to someone who used to be like a master to the old Mr. Inugami. She's so unbelievably beautiful. Everyone says that there couldn't be anyone more beautiful in all of Japan." "Wow, that's attractive. That attractive? Alright, let's get a good look at her face." Chuckling at the maid's exaggerated words, Kindaichi fished a pair of binoculars out of his suitcase and focused on the woman on the boat. As he fixed his eyes on the comely face that appeared through the lens, a thrill ran up his spine. The maid had not exaggerated. Kindaichi, too, had never seen such an extraordinary beauty in all of his life. As Tamayo pulled on the oars with her chin slightly lifted, lost in her pleasure, Her loveliness was almost ethereal. Her shoulder-length hair curled softly at the end, and she had full, healthy cheeks, long eyelashes, well-shaped nose, and irresistible, charming lips. With her sporty outfit clinging tightly to her supple body, the graceful line of her figure was something words that could not adequately describe. When a woman is so exquisite, the effect can be frightening, even terrifying. Kindaichi was watching Tamayo with bated breath when suddenly her expression changed. Tamayo stopped rowing and glanced quickly around the bottom of the boat. Then, for some reason, she cried out, dropping her oars, causing the boat to list and sway violently. She stood up, eyes wide with terror, frantically waved her hands above her head. The boat was rapidly sinking beneath her. Kindaichi leaped out of his wicker chair. That was chapter 2. That's quite fast. Chapter 3. The Viper in the Room. Kindaichi had by no means forgotten about the visitor he was expecting, but he assumed Wakabayashi would not arrive for some time. Besides, he could not ignore someone drowning in front of his eyes. He therefore dashed headlong out of his room and ran downstairs. In hindsight, this was the first event that disrupted his investigation of the Inugami case. If Tamayo had not been facing a watery death at the moment, and if Kindaichi had not rushed to her rescue, no doubt he would have been able to solve the case much earlier than he did. Kindaichi scrambled down to the ground floor, the maid following close behind, shouting, "This way, sir!" She dashed into the yard in her socks and began running towards the back gate. Kindaichi chased after her. The lake was nearby, and moored to the small pier after were several of the inn's boats, provided so guests could enjoy themselves on the lake. "Can you handle a rowboat, sir?" "No, wait, yes, don't worry." Oh my god. I answered that myself. I can't handle it. "Yes, don't worry." He knew he was a good oarsman. Kindaichi jumped into one of the boats and the maid swiftly undid the mooring line. "Be careful, sir!" "Right." Taking hold of the oars, Kindaichi began rowing with all of his strength. Looking out towards the middle of the lake, he saw the boat already half submerged and Tamayo crying desperately for help. Lake Nasu was not very deep, but its shallowness made it all the more treacherous. The weeds grew to the length of several meters from the bottom, and tangled as they were, like woman's hair. It was not unusual for someone, even an expert swimmer, to drown if accidentally caught in them. What was more, it often took a very long time for the corpse to rise to the surface. Others must have heard Tamayo scream, for soon after Kindaichi set off, several boats began pulling away from the pier of the boat rental shops across the way. From the inn, too, the manager and the other male employees had rushed outside at the maid's call, were noisily following in other boats. Ahead of all of them, Kindaichi was rowing frantically, when all of a sudden he noticed a man, the one whom he had seen earlier waving at Tamayo, run from the area of the sluice gate onto the berm. Realizing what was happening out on the water, the man swiftly took off his jacket and trousers and, diving with a splash into the lake, started swimming towards the sinking boat. His speed was amazing. His arms whirled around and round like water wheels, raising a terrific spray, leaving a long trail behind him. A silver snake slithering over the water, he made straight for the boat. In the end, it was he who reached Tamayo first. By the time Kindaichi finally drew near, her boat was already submerged up to the gunswell, and the man was holding her as she slumped exhausted in the water. "Are you alright? Come on, climb up, quick!" "Thanks, sir. Help Missy here, will you? I'll keep the boat steady." "Alright, then, let me have her." Tamayo thanked Kindaichi and clung onto his arm just barely to pull herself into his boat. "Now it's your turn," Kindaichi said to the man. "Climb aboard." "Yeah, thanks, don't mind if I do. Will you hold on to the side so that the boat won't flip over?" He scrambled aboard with great agility, and in that moment, Kindaichi, observing him square in the face for the first time, and was struck by his singular expression. The man looked just like a monkey. With his low brow, deep-set eyes, and abnormally hollowed cheeks, his appearance could only be described as simian. Yet, though his face was ugly beyond measure, his every action radiated sincerity. The man spoke sharply to Tamayo as if scolding her. See now, Missy, I told you. Didn't I tell you over and over to be careful? I mean, this is the third time. The third time? The words rang loudly in Kindaichi's ears. Tamayo looked somewhat startled and like a child reprimanded for being disobedient, half laughed and half cried. But monkey, there was nothing I could do. I had no idea there was a hole in the boat. There was a hole in the boat? Kindaichi stared at Tamayo in spite of himself, eyes wide in surprise. Yes, I think so. It seems there was a hole and someone had plugged it up with something. Whatever it was, it got dislodged and... Just then, the manager of the inn and a crowd of customers from the boat rental shop drew near. Kindaichi sat lost in thought for some time before turning to the manager. I wonder if you could do something for me. Could you find some way to keep this boat afloat and tow it somewhere to the shore? I would like to take a look at it later. The manager agreed to do so, though he had a puzzled expression on his face. Ignoring his look, Kindaichi turned to Tamayo. Okay, let's get you home. As soon as you get there, I want you to jump into a hot bath and keep warm so that you won't catch a cold. Yes, she replied. Thank you very much. Leaving the manager and onlookers still clamoring loudly about this and that, Kindaichi began slowly rowing the boat, Tamayo and Monkey sitting in front of him. With her head resting against Monkey's broad chest, Tamayo seemed completely reassured and content. Monkey had a horribly unattractive face but a powerful rock-like body, and as Kindaichi watched Tamayo being held securely in Monkey's thick, sturdy arm, he was reminded of a fragile vine clinging onto an ancient pine tree. Seen up close in this way, Tamayo's beauty was all the more remarkable. The loveliness of her features went without saying, but the faint, youthful glow of her wet skin was absolutely radiant. Even Kindaichi, who was rarely affected by feminine allure, felt his heart pounding. He sat gazing dreamily at Tamayo's face for some time, but realizing that she had noticed his stare and was blushing, he became flustered and gulped. Somewhat abashed, he turned to Monkey. You said something strange a while ago, that this was the third time. Have things like this happened before? Monkey's eyes flashed suspiciously. Searching Kindaichi's face, he said sullenly, Yeah, a lot of strange things have been happening recently. That's why I'm worried. Strange things? Oh, it's nothing really, Tamayo interjected. Monkey, you're just being foolish. Are you still dwelling on what happened? Those were just silly accidents. Accidents? Missy, you could have been killed. I just think it all very strange. What do you mean? Just what kind of things have happened? Well, one time a snake was coiled up inside Missy's beddings. Good thing she noticed it quick, 'cause if it bit her, well, she may not have died, but she would have been really sick. Then the second time, somebody messed with the brakes of her car so they wouldn't work. Almost went off a cliff, she did. No, it wasn't like that. It all happened purely by chance. Monkey, you just worry too much. But if this kind of things keeps happening, who knows what might happen next? When I think of that, I get really worried. You silly thing. What more could possibly happen? I've got good luck on my side. I'm just naturally lucky, so I've always come out alright. Don't worry so much, or you'll end up making me nervous. As Tamayo and Monkey was thus sparring, the boat reaches the sluice gate of the Inugami's estate. Kindaichi left them on the berm. They thanked him and he rowed back towards the inn. On the way back, he reflected upon what he has just heard from Monkey. A viper in the bedroom, faulty brakes, and now a hole in the boat. Were there Were they really all chance occurrences, or as Tamayo insisted, or was someone relentless someone's relentless will at work? If the latter, it meant that only one thing, that someone was after Tamayo's life. Couldn't there also be some connection between the so-called accidents with the Wakabayashi's ominous premonition? Yes, he would ask Wakabayashi, who should be arriving in the inn soon. Kindaichi began to pull the oars more strongly. Returning to the inn, he found that Wakabayashi had already arrived. The maid informed him, "Your guest came asking for you, sir, so I showed him up to your room." Kindaichi hastened to the second floor and went to his room, but Wakabayashi was nowhere in sight. He had definitely been here, however, for a cigarette butt lay still and smoldering in the ashtray, and an unfamiliar hat had been tossed in the corner of the tatami mat room. He must have gone to the restroom, Kindaichi thought, and sat down on the wicker chair. But wait as he did, the visitor did not reappear. Too impatient to wait any longer, Kindaichi rang for the maid. "What happened to my guest? He seemed to have disappeared." "He has? I wonder what happened. Maybe he's gone to the restroom." "That's possible, but even so, he has been gone too long." "Maybe he's waiting in some other room by mistake. Try to find him, will you?" "How strange. I wonder where he's gone." The maid left with a puzzled expression on her face. She had not been gone for long, however, when Kindaichi heard her shrill scream. Leaping up to his feet in alarm, he ran to the direction of her voice and found her cowering in front of the restroom, her face pale as if drained of all blood. "What's wrong?" Sir, your guest. Kindaichi looked where she was pointing. The door of the restroom was ajar, and through the opening he could see a man's legs sprawled across the floor. With sharp intake of breath, he opened the door and stepped inside the restroom. The sight before him riveted him where he stood. A man, wearing dark sunglasses, was lying prone on the white tile floor of the restroom. He must have writhed in horrible agony before he died. The collar of his overcoat and his muffler were in disarray. His fingers were contorted as if he had desperately crawled on the floor. The white tiles were splattered with blood. He coughed out. Kindaichi stood frozen for a while, but then approached cautiously and lifted the man's arm. Of course, there was no repulse. He removed the man's sunglasses and looked back at the maid. "Do you recognize him?" The man peered fearfully into the dead man's face. "Why, it's Mr. Wakabayashi!" At her words, Kindaichi hearts turned over. Stunned, he was unable to move. "Damn, son! Bruh." Wait, is my stream alright? Pretty good so far. Who Done It? It's basically a Who Done It book. Chapter 4, I think. They don't go by numbers. I'm just gonna go with like the title of the chapter. Mr. Furudate song. Kindaichi could not imagine a worse disgrace. He had always believed the relationship between a private investigator and client to be like that between a priest and a confessor. Just as a sinful confessor pours his heart out to the priest and places himself in the priest's hand, the client divulged to a detective secrets he would never tell anyone else and seeks his help. To do this, a client must have the utmost confidence in the detective's character, and so the detective must repay his client's trust. Kindaichi had always believed this and prided himself on never having betrayed a client's trust. With this case, however, No sooner had the client turned to him for help than he had been murdered, and after coming to Kindaichi's own room no less. For Kindaichi, could there be a worse humiliation? Examined from a different angle. Moreover, it seemed undeniable that the person who had killed Wakabayashi had realized that the victim had intended to reveal at least part of his secret to a detective named Kindaichi, and the killer had resorted to such ruthless acts so as to prevent this from occurring. That would mean that the murderer already knew of Kindaichi's existence and was presenting him with a challenge. Speculating in this way, Kindaichi felt his blood boil and a fierce desire to fight growing inside him. At first, Kindaichi had been rather skeptical about this case and had doubted the events Wakabayashi feared would actually come to pass. Now, however, all his doubts had been cast aside. The case seemed to have roots far deeper than even Wakabayashi's letter had indicated. Be that as it may, Kindaichi at the outset found himself in a rather awkward position. He was, after all, Sherlock Holmes. He was not, after all, Sherlock Holmes. His renown had not reached every far corner of the earth, including this one. It was therefore quite difficult for him to explain his situation to the chief of Nasu police and the detective in charge, both of whom had rushed to the inn upon hearing the news. Moreover, he had some scruples about making the contents of Wakabayashi's letter public immediately, and for that reason especially, he hesitated to let the police know his real reason for coming to Nasu. As a result, the detective in charge was vaguely suspicious of Kindaichi. He interrogated him regarding every minor detail of his relationship with Wakabayashi. Kindaichi finally hedged by saying that he had been commissioned to conduct an investigation, but that now, with the client dead, he had no way of finding out what it was about. The detective made it clear, although he took pains to phrase it discreetly, that Kindaichi was to remain in Nasu for the time being, something to which Kindaichi had no objections, for he himself had firmly resolved not to leave town until he had solved the case. An autopsy was conducted on Wakabayashi's body that very day, and the cause of death was confirmed. He had indeed been poisoned. Oddly, however, the poison had been detected not in the gastric tissue but in the lung tissue. In short, Wakabayashi had not drunk the poison, but had smoked it. With this revelation, the cigarette butt the victim had left in the ashtray instantly commanded attention. It was a foreign brand, and the test showed that the poison had been mixed into the tobacco. And curiously too, though several cigarettes still remained in Wakabayashi's cigarette case, none of them had been tampered with, and only the one in the ashtray, had been lethal. In other words, the murderer had not decided to kill Wakabayashi on a specific day or specific time. All that mattered was that he died sooner or later. This method seemed extremely casual, yet for the reason it was all the more subtle and ingenious. The killer did not need to be in the victim's presence when the death occurred, so would be much less likely to fall under suspicion rather with some other means of poisoning. Kindaichi could not help but marvel at this devious plan. The person who had thrown this challenge in his face was no easy foe. On the day after Wakabayashi's death, Kindaichi received a visitor at the Nasu Inn. The card the maid brought up read Kyozo Furudate. Recognizing the name at the start, Kindaichi narrowed his eyes. This Furudate must be the head of the Furudate Law Office. The man, who was the Inugami's clan's family lawyer and who was in charge of the safekeeping of Saihei Inugami's will. With some apprehension, Kindaichi told the maid to show him up immediately. Furudate was a middle-aged gentleman in swarthy complexion and a rather stern-out countenance, all the time observing Kindaichi cautiously with a lawyer's sharp, shrewd eyes. He nonetheless used the politest term to introduce himself and to apologize for visiting unannounced. Kindaichi, was his habit, scratched his head briskly. I must say, I was quite shocked yesterday, but it must have come as a big blow to you too. Yes, it's so extraordinary. I still can't believe it's true. I came here today because I wanted to ask you about it. Yes? The police told me just now that Wakabayashi intended to commission you to investigate some matter. Yes, that's right. But he was killed before he had a chance to tell me what it was, so I'm afraid I'll never know what he wanted me to look into. Surely you must have some idea. I mean, he must have contacted you by letter or something. Well, yes. Kindaichi fixed his gaze intently on the lawyer. Mr. Furudate, you are the Inugami's clan attorney, are you not? Yes, I am. In that case, you wish to protect the family's honor. Of course. To tell you the truth, Mr. Furudate, Kindaichi abruptly lowered his voice. I kept this from the police since I too did not want to damage their honor, and I thought it best not to say anything unnecessarily, but I received this letter from Mr. Wakabayashi. Kindaichi took out the letter, passed it to Furudate, and carefully studied his expression as he read it. Profound surprise swept rapidly over the lawyer's face. Deep furrows lined his dark brows, and he began to perspire freely. His hands trembled as he held the letter. Mr. Furudate, do you know anything about what is written in this letter? Furudate, who had sat stupefied for some time, started when Kindaichi spoke. Well, no. I find it quite strange. I mean, even if there were indications that something might happen to the Inugamis, why would Mr. Wakabayashi know about it? From this letter, it seems that he was quite certain. Do you have any idea why he felt so sure? An expression of utmost agitation had appeared on Furudate's face. He obviously knew something. Kindaichi leaned forward. Mr. Furudate, weren't you aware that Mr. Wakabayashi had sent this letter, that he had asked me to investigate something? Not at all. Thinking back though, he was acting strange. He seemed jumpy, afraid of something. Afraid of something? Yes, of course. I realized this only after he was killed. What could he have been afraid of? Do you have any idea? Well, in that regard to Furudate seemed to be debating something with himself, making up his mind. He went on. Actually, that's what I came here to discuss with you today. It's about Sahi Inugami's will. What about the will? I have the will locked inside my office safe. Yesterday, after what happened to Wakabayashi, I felt uneasy. So I looked inside the safe. There are indications that someone has opened and read it. Someone's read the will? Furudate nodded gravely. Kindaichi asked somewhat breathlessly, And would there be a problem if someone has read the will? Well, it would have been opened and read sooner or later anyway. Now, of course, since Kiyo has finally returned, it can be read in a few days, but I've always concerned that it might cause a big trouble. Is there something unusual about the will? Extremely. Furudate spoke with emotion. It is so unusual as to be somewhat irrational. I tried my best to persuade the old man. I told him that it would make members of his family hate each other, but he was so stubborn. Can't you tell me what it says? Oh no, Furudate refused with a gesture of his hand. That wouldn't be right. According to the wishes to the deceased, the content of the will are not to be released on any account until Kiyo returns to the family home in Nasu. I understand. In that case, I won't press the matter, but the only people interested in its content would be the members of the Inugami clan. So if the will appeared to have been read, that means one of them must have opened. But that's impossible. I can't see how any of the Inugamis could have had a chance to open that safe. No, the way I see it, someone must have bribed Wakabayashi. He would have been able to open the safe, so one of the Inugamis must have asked him to make a copy of the will. Then, when strange things started happening in the household, Wakabayashi must have become afraid. What do you mean by strange things? Furudate peered at Kindaichi's face searchingly. I think you probably guessed. Yesterday, for instance, I heard that something strange happened out on the lake. Kindaichi jerked. The boat. Yes, I heard you examined the boat. I did. Someone had bored a hole in the bottom and plugged it with some kind of putty. So that woman, Tamayo, is mentioned in the will? Oh, yes. The whole thing will revolve around her. She is in a position of absolute advantage as regards the Inugami inheritance. Unless she dies, she alone will decide who inherits the family fortune. All at once, memories of the lovely woman of yesterday flooded over Kindaichi. What destiny had Saihei Inugami prepared for the rare beauty that radiant goes? In his mind's eye, Kindaichi saw the boat again, sinking rapidly in the afternoon sun, Tamayo in sight, desperately waving her arms above her, and a huge, shadowy black hand looming threatening behind her. Hello, Cardinal. Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. Well, does anyone feel like this sounds a bit like Knives Out? Does to me. A little bit. Just chotto. Just chotto. Sounds a bit to me like Knives Out. Yeah? I wonder if someone's read this book before making that movie. I don't know. We'll see. Sounds a bit like Knives Out to me. This is written in the 40s or something. Okay. Next chapter. Kiyo's return. November 1st, 1940s. 2 weeks had passed. No, I'm not in my dungeon. No, I'm in my room. Sorry. Okay. Kiyo's return. November 1st, 1940s. 2 weeks had passed since Kindaichi's arrival. From the morning hours, the town of Nasu, nestled on the shores of Lake Nasu in the Shinshu region, buzzed with a portentous air. The news was all over the town. Kiyo Inugami, the heir apparently to the Inugami throne, for some unknown reasons, had been lingering in Tokyo after his repatriation from Southeast Asia, had finally returned late last night to the family home in Nasu with his mother, Matsuko, who had gone to meet him. Hey, have a seat. The prosperity of Nasu depended entirely on the fate of the Inugami clan. As the clan prospered, so did the town, formerly an impoverished lakeside village in mountainous terrain, buffeted with harsh climate and poorly endowed agriculturally. Nasu had grown to its present. Hey, hey, hey. Come, have a seat, Wait. Nasu had grown to its present population of more than 100,000 only because the Inugami's grew with its power of its vast capital and had sown its seed there. As the seeds had sprouted, grown, and flowered, the surrounding region had also flourished, giving rise to the present-day community of Nasu. For this day, there was no one living in Nasu or its environs, whether directly connected with the operations of the Inugami group or not, who had not benefited to some degree from its presence. In one way or another, they all lived off the crumbs thrown to them by one of the family enterprises, so that the Inugamis were in fact the true lords of Nasu. No wonder then that the good people of Nasu were immensely curious about the Inugamis. It would be no exaggeration to say that after the old Sahei's passing of the fate of the clan was a matter of concern for each and every resident of the region, holding the fate of Inugami clan in the hands of Matsuko's only son, Kiyo, whose homecoming, as everyone knew, would allow, finally, Sahei's will to be read. Therefore, they had awaited Kiyo's repatriation as eagerly as, no, perhaps even more eagerly than the family members had. Finally, the people had heard that Kiyo had returned to Japan. The news that he landed in Hakata had zipped through the town like an electrical current through wire. They had longed impatiently for the man who would perhaps be their new lord and master, waiting him to rush back to Nasu without delay. Wait as they had, however, Kiyo had not come home. And he and his mother Matsuko, who had gone to meet him in Hakata, had stopped off at their city house in Tokyo and had shown no signs of leaving it. A delay of a couple of days that the people of Nasu could understand, but as their sojourn had lengthened to a week, then to 10 days, the people had become concerned. Why didn't Kiyo come home? Why didn't he hasten back at a top speed and demand that his grandfather's will to be read? His mother, Matsuko, would be more aware than anyone how the entire situation depended on him. Perhaps someone had proposed. Kiyo was ill and was convalescing at the Tokyo house. No, others had countered. How could that be the case? If he were convalescent, the country air of Nasu would be much more suitable than Tokyo's. Besides, if he had had the strength to make his way back from the far-off Hakata to Tokyo, there should be no problem in extending the journey the short distance to Nasu. As wealthy as the Inugamis were, if a train trip was difficult, they could always rent a car. As for doctors too, the family surely had the means to summon the finest from Tokyo to Nasu. Besides, Kiyo had never liked living in the big city even as a boy. He dearly loved the Lake Nasu area, its nature, climate, and people, and he was intensely attached to the lakeside villa where he had been born. If the long war and subsequent detention had exhausted him and ruined his health, what better place for him to rest and recuperate than the main family home by Lake Nasu? So, the people had said it was hard to attribute Kiyo's and Matsuko's extended stay in Tokyo to illness. No one in the end was able to explain adequately what could be detaining, and the mother. No one was able to explain adequately what could be detaining the mother and son in Tokyo. Why on earth were Kiyo and Matsuko tormenting the other family members and the people of Nasu like this? If the townspeople had felt this way, imagine the impatience of the other family members. Having gone alone to Hakata to meet her son, Matsuko had wired her two half-sisters through their husbands, telling them to wait her and Kiyo in Nasu. Takeko, Umeko, and their family had rushed to Nasu from Tokyo and Kobe respectively and had been waiting irritably day after day for Matsuko and Kiyo to return. Strange enough, though, having unpacked their bags at their city house in Tokyo, Matsuko and Kiyo had remained there, dropping out of touch for more than 2 weeks. When the family had sent messages urging their speedy return, they had wired back saying that they would set out that day, then the next, but in fact they had shown no signs of stirring. Even more oddly, when Takeko and Umeko, no longer able to stand the presence, secretly arranged for a detective to investigate the comings and goings of mother and son, he had reported being unable to ascertain anything. Matsuko and Kiyo had remained secluded in their private quarters and had not shown themselves to anyone. Thus, their stay in Tokyo had drawn increasing suspicion, and together with the murder of Wakabayashi, had cast a dark shadow over the entire town of Nasu. On the morning of November 1st, Kindaichi had overslept, and now, at past 11, he had just finished brunch. He dragged a chair onto the balcony overlooking the lake and was absent-mindedly cleaning his teeth with a toothpick when he was surprised by an unexpected visitor, the Inugami clan's attorney Kyozo Furudate. "Well, hello! I'm rather surprised to see you today," Kindaichi greeted him with his characteristic affable grin. Furudate, as usual, looked troubled and dour. "Why do you say that?" "Why? Well, I heard that he has come home. If that's true, I suppose the Inugamis would arrange to have the will read immediately, so they would have you in their clutches and be keeping you insanely busy." "Ah, so you've heard about it already." "Of course. It's such a small town. Besides, the Inugamis are like lord and master to the people around here. Word of anything that happens to them, big or small, spreads like wildfire through the town. The maid came in this morning as soon as I awoke and shouted, 'Extra! Late breaking news!'" he explained, laughing heartily. "Oh, where's my manners? Please sit down." Furudate nodded slightly but remained standing on the balcony gazing at the Inugami villa. Then, raising his shoulders with shudder, he noiselessly seated himself across Kindaichi. Kindaichi noticed that Furudate was in morning dress and held a large portfolio under his arm. Laying his portfolio down softly in the wicker tea table, the lawyer sat for a while without speaking. Kindaichi studied him silently, but finally, grinning and scratching his head, he asked, "What's wrong? You seem totally lost in thought. Where are you going in those clothes?" "Well," Furudate cleared his throat as if jerked back to reality. "To tell the truth, I am about to go to the Inugami's villa. But suddenly, I had the urge to see you before that. Is there something I can do for you?" "No, I have nothing in particular to ask of you, but..." Furudate mumbled. Soon, though, he continued more strongly, as if angry. "Of course, I don't need to tell you why I have been summoned to the Inugami's villa today, as you yourself just said, is to read Sahi's will. So my sole duty is to go straight there and read the will in front of the assembled family. My job is over then. I shouldn't have any qualms. So why, then, am I hesitating like this? Why am I facilitating? Oh my god! Why am I vacillating so? And why have I come here to you to say these idiotic things? I don't understand. I don't even understand myself anymore." Kindaichi, who had been staring at the lawyer's face, dumbfounded, presently sighed audibly and said, "Mr. Furudate, you are tired. I am sure it's fatigue. You really ought to be more careful, and..." His eye twinkled impishly. "As for why you are here, I think I know the reason. This proves that whether you are aware of it or not, you are gradually begun to trust me." Furudate raised his eyebrow and glared at Kindaichi, and soon contorted his face in a wry smile. "You know, you may be right. Actually, Mr. Kindaichi, I owe you an apology." "An apology?" "To tell the truth, I asked a fellow attorney I know in Tokyo to investigate your background." At this, Kindaichi widened his eyes in surprise. He sat staring open-mouthed for a while, and then exploded in a roar of laughter. Well, the famous investigator is investigated. No, you don't have to apologize, Mr. Furudate. In fact, you have taught me a very good lesson. You know, I might not look it, but I'm actually quite vain, and I'm quite confident that everyone in Japan knew the name Kosuke Kindaichi." He chuckled. No, I'm just kidding, of course. But anyway, what did your friend tell you?" "Well, as a matter of fact," Furudate squirmed on his seat as the chair was uncomfortable, "he gave you this unconditional seal of approval. He said that I could trust you completely, both professionally and personally." Having said that, though, the lawyer still seemed unable to erase the expression of doubt from his face. "Thank you. I'm honored that you would say that." And as was his habit when something delighted him. Kindaichi vigorously scratched his head with his unruly mop of hair. So that's why you came to see me before this family conference that you are not sure how to handle. Yes, you could say that. As I told you before, I dislike this will. I shouldn't make any comments, positive or negative, about a client's wishes, but will is just too outrageous. It will be like hurling the remaining members of the Inugami clan into the maelstrom of conflict, kin against kin. What an uproar there will be when this is announced. I've had that vague, uneasy feeling ever since I was first asked to prepare the will. Then Wakabayashi is murdered, and now, with the case still unsolved, Kiyo returns, which is not to say that's not a good thing. Whether Kiyo's homecoming turns out to be a cause of celebration for the Inugamis or not, is certainly a happy occasion that a man who has suffered overseas for so long has finally come home. But why did Kiyo have to return home so surreptitiously, avoiding everyone? Why does he so dislike for people to see his face? That just makes me uncomfortable. Kindaichi had been listening attentively to Furudate's increasing emotional words, but at that point, he suddenly lifted his eyebrows. Kiyo's avoiding being seen? That's right. He doesn't want people to see his face? That's right. Mr. Kindaichi, haven't you heard it yet? With a blank look, Kindaichi shook his head. Furudate leaned forward over the table. Actually, I heard this from one of the Inugami servants. Matsuko and Kiyo returned to the estate suddenly last night without warning. They must have come from Tokyo on the last train. It was quite late when the bell rang, and the houseboy was in charge of the front entrance went to open the gate, wondering who on earth would be visiting at that hour. He was astonished to find Matsuko waiting there. Behind her, a man came through the gate with the collar of his coat turned up around his neck, and this man, the houseboy said, had his head covered completely with something like a black hood. Kindaichi's eyes widened in astonishment. Listening to the lawyer's story, he felt his blood go cold. A hood? Yes. And as the houseboy stood there in surprise, Matsuko simply said, "It's Kiyo," and quickly led her son from the foyer back to her own sitting room. Of course, the rest of the family heard from the houseboy what had happened, and they were all in an uproar. After all, Takeko, Umeko, and their families had been standing by the villa, waiting impatiently for weeks for the two of them to return. They immediately rushed to Matsuko's room, which is in the far annex of the house, but she refused to let them see Kiyo, telling them that both she and Kiyo were tired and would talk to them in the morning. That was last night, but no one has seen Kiyo's face. Just one person, a maid, saw someone she assumed to be Kiyo coming out of the bathroom, but she had a black hood over his head even then. Apparently the hood has two holes where the eyes are, and when she saw the eyes glint from behind them, it was spooky. It was so spooky, she said. She thought she was going to faint. The feeling of the utmost delight began growing inside Kindaichi. Something was going on. Matsuko's and Kiyo's inexplicable stay in Tokyo, Kiyo hiding his face. He smelled something not right, something abnormal. The more the case reeked of the unnatural, the more strongly Kindaichi's professional appetite was whetted. Kindaichi enthusiastically scratched his head, but Mr. Furudate, Kiyo can't hide his face forever. He has to take off his hood sooner or later to prove that he really is Kiyo Inugami. Of course. Take today, for example. I can't read the will until I make certain that the man who has returned is indeed Kiyo. So I intend to insist that he take off his hood, but when I imagine what we might find underneath it, I get a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. Kindaichi frowned for a time, pondering the situation, but then said, well, it might be nothing to worry about at all. I mean, he has been in a battle, so his face might be scarred, or something like that. Abruptly, he leaned over the tea table, but changing the subject to Mr. Wakabayashi. Have you found out to whom he leaked the content of the will? Not yet. The police seems to have studied his diary and so on carefully, but they haven't had any leads yet. But who among the Inugamis was on the closest term with him? In other words, who had the best opportunity to bribe him? I really have no idea, Furudate admitted, furrowing his brows. All the members of the clan stayed in Nasu for some time after the old Saihei died. Since then, they have gathered numerous time for memorial services, so anyone who might have wanted to bribe Wakabayashi would have had the chance. But even Mr. Wakabayashi wouldn't let himself be bribed by just anyone. Isn't there someone in particular, someone special, he would go out of his way for? It was a casual question, but Furudate appeared thunderstruck, catching his breath in surprise. He remained staring off into space for some time, but eventually took out his handkerchief and started to wipe his neck, nervously saying, No, no, that can't be. After all, she's the one who has been in danger so many times recently. It was Kindaichi's turn to be surprised. He stared at Furudate's face, transfixed. Presently, he whispered in a hoarse voice, Mr. Furudate? She's the one... Are you talking about the woman Tamayo? Well, yes. It's clear from Wakabayashi's diary that he was secretly in love with her. I'm sure he would have done anything she asked him to do. Mr. Wakabayashi was supposed to have stopped by the Inugami's house right before coming here to see me. Did he see Tamayo at the time? I don't know anything about that, but even if he did, a beautiful woman like that, giving him a poison secret? No, I can't believe it. Furudate stammered as he wiped his sweaty brows. Besides, at the time, the entire Inugami clan was gathered in that house, except Matsuko, of course, who was in Tokyo. Mr. Furudate, who was the man named Monkey? He seemed terribly devoted to Tamayo. Oh, him. His... Furudate glanced at his watch hurriedly and said, That late already? Mr. Kindaichi, I'm sorry, but I must be leaving. They're waiting for me at the villa. Mr. Furudate, Kindaichi called to the lawyer, running after him after he rushed from the room carrying his portfolio. You can tell me the contents of the will after you read it at the Inugami's villa, can't you? Furudate stopped at his track and with a start and glanced back at Kindaichi. Of course, there wouldn't be any problem with that. I'll stop by on my way back and fill you in. With those parting words, Furudate, portfolio under his arms, swiftly descended the stairs as if running away from something. Little did Kindaichi know then that he would be given the chance to learn the content of the will much sooner than he expected. Whoa, guys! Hey, morning, Jean. Good afternoon, Jean. It's getting spicy, guys. Sorry. Yeah. Next chapter. The 3 heirlooms.
Have you ever had a dream that you can go you wanna go
Yeah, I do have a dream. Okay. Next chapter, the 3 heirlooms. 3 heirlooms. After Furudate left, Kindaichi remained on the balcony for a while, leaning back in his wicker chair with an empty look on his face. The autumn had grown deep in this mountainous region, and a pleasant breeze swept shimmering over the azure green surface of the lake. It was high noon, and across the way, the autumn sun glittered in the stained glass window of the Inugami's European-style villa. Everything was peaceful, a moment caught in the painted landscape. Yet, as he gazed at the enormous building at the lake, Kindaichi could not help but feel a chill run up his spine. At that very moment, Sahei's will, a will whose contents, according to Furudate, were explosive, was about to be read. What would happen inside the elegant mansion of Sahei's last instruction were made known. Kindaichi picked up again the life of Saihei Inugami. For an hour or so, he sat leafing here and there through its pages, but looked up in surprise when a voice suddenly called from the direction of the lake. A single boat was docked at the pier of the inn, and inside it, standing and waving, was the man called Monkey. Kindaichi frowned and leaned over at the railing because Monkey seems to be beckoning to him. "Are you calling me?" Monkey nodded in affirmation with an exaggerated gesture. With a strange sense of apprehension, Kindaichi hastened at the top speed down the stairs and out to the pier behind the inn. "What is it?" "Mr. Furudate told me to get you," Monkey answered in his usual brusque manner. "Mr. Furudate? Has something happened at the Inugami's?" "Not that I know. He said that he's going to read the will now so that he wants you to come if you like." "Oh, I see. I'll be just in a minute. Wait for me here, will you?" Hurrying to his room, Kindaichi changed out of the inn's robe into his own kimono and hakama trousers. As soon as he returned to the boat and got in, Monkey started growing. "Monkey, do the family members know I'm coming?" "Yeah, it was the Mrs. order." "The Mrs.? Do you mean Mrs. Matsuko, who came back last night?" "That's right." Furudate must have appealed to Matsuko, citing what had happened to Wakabayashi in her absence as well as his own disturbing premonitions. He must have suggested to her that they invite Kindaichi to be present to help avert any evil incidents that might arise after the reading of the will. Kindaichi's heart pounded. In any case, he was happy that he was being presented with the opportunity to meet the Inugami clan so soon. "Monkey, has Miss Tamayo been alright since the problem with the boat?" "Yeah, thanks to you." "The boat. Do all the Inugamis go out on the lake on this boat? On that boat?" "Nah, that's Missy's boat. That's the only one she uses." Monkey's answer disturbed Kindaichi. If that boat was used exclusively by Tamayo, then without question, the person who bored a hole in it was after her life and hers alone. "Monkey, you said something strange the other day that Miss Tamayo has had peculiar mishaps several times recently." "Yeah." When did these mishaps start occurring?" "When? I guess about the end of spring. Right after Mr. Inugami's died." "Yeah. Who on earth would play such a prank on her? Do you have any ideas, Monkey?" "If I knew that," Monkey's eyes flashed, "I would make sure that he didn't get away with it." "What exactly is your relationship with Miss Tamayo?" "She's my very, very precious Missy. Mr. Inugami told me to protect her with my life," Monkey proclaimed proudly, baring his teeth in a savage grin. Looking at the powerful rock-like chest and thick arm of this ugly giant, Kindaichi felt queasy. God forbid this colossus should consider him an enemy. No doubt, Monkey always guarded Tamayo like a faithful dog would, and if anyone should so much to try to harm a hair on her head, he would immediately pounce on the culprit and break the person's neck. "By the way, Monkey, I heard Kiyo returned last night." "Yeah." Monkey grew taciturn again. "Did you see him?" "Nah, nobody's seen him yet." "Did Kiyo..." As Kindaichi began to speak, the boat passed through the sluice gate and glided into the boathouse of the Inugami's estate. Exiting the boathouse, Kindaichi was astounded by the huge number of large bloom-potted chrysanthemums placed everywhere throughout the extensive grounds. Even though Kindaichi was not particularly given to the botanical appreciation, he could not help but marvel at this magnificent specimen at the height of their glory. In one corner of the grounds, there was even a chrysanthemum field covered with lattice paper screen to protect the flowers from frost. "How magnificent! Whose work is this?" "I take care of them." "The chrysanthemums is one of Inugami's heirlooms." "Heirlooms?" Kindaichi repeated, but Monkey began walking rapidly ahead without answering and led him into the foyer. "Guest is here," called Monkey, and a maid immediately appeared from somewhere inside the house. "Please come in. They are waiting for you." She led Kindaichi down a long corridor that seemed never to end. Then on through a maze of other corridors that opened onto countless tatami mat rooms. Not a soul however, was to be seen in any of them. The entire house, in tense expectation of the momentous event, was as hushed as the graveyard. The maid finally reached the room where the Inugami clan has assembled. "Your guest has arrived," she said, and after dropping to her knees and bowing slightly, hands touching the floor, she slid open the door. At that instant, Kindaichi felt all eyes turn simultaneously to him. Furudate acknowledged him with his eyes and said, "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat over there. I hope you don't mind being seated at the back of the room." When Kindaichi bowed slightly and sat down, Furudate continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Kosuke Kindaichi, whom I was just telling about you, who I was telling you about. Whom I was just telling you about." My God. Each of the Inugamis acknowledged Kindaichi with a slight nod of the head. Kindaichi waited until everyone's head had left him and were focused on the lawyer once again, and then he slowly glanced around the room. The large room in which they were seated had been made by removing the partitions between two 12-matted rooms. Placed on the plain wood altar of the head of the room was a photograph of the late Sahe Inugami adorned with large chrysanthemum blooms. In front of the altar sat 3 young men wearing formal black kimonos, but the sight of the one sitting in the seat of honor at the father's end made Kindaichi's heart pound uneasily. The figure wore a black hood over his head with 2 holes cut for his eyes. He hung his head and gazed downward. However, so that Kindaichi could not see past the openings, this has to be the recently returned Kiyo. The faces of the 2 young men seated next to Kiyo, Take, the son of Sahe's second daughter Takeko, and Tomo, the only child of the third daughter Umeko, were familiar to Kindaichi from their photographs in the life of Sahe Inugami. Take was a stocky man as white as he was tall, while Tomo was slender and seemed to be of delicate constitution. Take sat in a taciturn, haughty expression that revealed his disdain for all, while Tomo sat, looking somehow cunning and insincere, shifted his eyes ceaselessly from place to place. Their personalities were in sharp contrast to each other. Seated by herself, somewhat apart from these 3 men, was Tamayo, elegant and correct, quiet and reserved in this way. Her attractiveness was even more remarkable. Unlike the other day, she was wearing a black kimono with a bit of white showing around the neck. She looked older, but her beauty now had an almost spiritual aura. Furudate sat slightly apart from Tamayo, facing Tamayo in order Matsuko, Takeko and her husband, Toranatsuke, their daughter Sayoko, and Umeko and her husband Kokichi. Sayoko too was quite attractive and would have been considered pretty enough if Tamayo were not in the same room. Compared directly to Tamayo's rare beauty, however, her physical attributes paled badly. Sayoko herself seemed aware of this, for the looks she cast at Tamayo were filled of tremendous hostility. Her beauty concealed taunts. Furudate, with a light cough, took up the thick envelope he had in his lap. "I will now read the last will and testament of Mr. Sahe Inugami. But before that, I would like to make a request of Mrs. Matsuko." Matsuko looked at Furudate without a word. She was a middle-aged woman of 50 or so who seemed used to getting her own way. "As you know," Furudate continued, "I am authorized to open and read this will only when Mr. Kiyo has been repatriated and all of the family members are gathered together. I know. Kiyo is sitting there, as you can see. But," the lawyer spoke somewhat falteringly, "I cannot tell if this is really... Of course, I'm not doubting your word, but if I could just take a look at his face." Matsuko's eyes blazed intensely. "What? Are you suggesting, Mr. Furudate, that Kiyo is an impostor?" Her voice was deep and husky and had something malicious about it. No, that's not what I meant. What about the rest of you? Do you mind if we let the metal drop? Of course we mind, Takeko interjected immediately, in contrast to her elder sister Matsuko, who had a thin frame that looked as strong as a bamboo. The double chin Takeko was short and heavy, like a small mountain, and looked full of vitality. Yet she had none of the kind-heartedness often found in buxom matrons. She seemed as mean-spirited as her half-sister. Umeko, what do you think? Do you think Kiyo should take off his hood and let us see his face? Of course, Umeko answered without hesitation. Of the three half-sisters, she was the most attractive, but she looked the most venomous of the three as well. Takeko's husband, Toranosuke, and Umeko's husband, Kokichi, expressed their agreement. Thank you for stopping by. See you again. Expressed their agreement. Toranosuke was a 50-ish, heavy-set man with florid complexion, an arrogant air, and a menacing look in his eyes. It was obvious that Take had inherited this physique and demeanor from his parents. Compared to Toranosuke, Umeko's husband, Kokichi, was much smaller and paler, and had what at first looked like a mild-mannered air. But the restless eyes, identical to those of his sons, revealed the evil in his mind. A faint smile never left his thin lips. The room grew hushed for a moment, and then Matsuko suddenly screeched, "Kiyo! Take off your hood for them!" The hooded head jerked. Then, after a long hesitation, Kiyo's trembling hand rose gradually to raise the hood from his face. Kiyo's face, yes, Kindaichi remembered it from the photograph in the life of Shohei Inugami. But what a peculiar face! Its features were frozen, completely immobile. The face, to use a sinister comparison like that of a dead man, it was a face that was lifeless, devoid of human warmth. Sayoko screamed, and the room was hurled into confusion. As Matsuko's hysterical voice, furious with rage, rang over the din, "Kiyo's received a horrible wound, so I had that mask made for him. That's why we stayed in Tokyo for so long. I had a mask made to look just the way Kiyo's face used to be. Kiyo, raise your mask a little for them." Kiyo touched his chin with trembling hand and began to pull the mask over his chin as if peeling the skin off his face. Sayoko again screamed sharply. Kindaichi could not keep his knees from shaking. He felt something heavy in the pit of his stomach as if he had swallowed lead. From beneath the precisely made rubber mask appeared a jaw and lips that looked identical to those on the mask. They were perfectly normal. When Kiyo raised the mask further, however, Sayoko screamed the third time. Kiyo's nose was gone. In its place was a pulpy reddish-black mass of flesh that looked as if it had festered and burst. "Kiyo, that's enough. Put your mask back on." When Kiyo rearranged his mask as it had been, everyone in the room felt they had seen enough. If they had been shown any more of the disgusting formless masked flesh, none of them would have been able to keep their foot down for quite some time after. "So, Mr. Furudate, are you satisfied? There can be no doubt that this is Kiyo. His face might be a little changed, but I am his mother, and I guarantee it. This is my son Kiyo. So please, hurry up and read the will." Furudate, stunned and had been staring with bated breath, but suddenly pulled back into reality by Matsuko's word. He looked around the room. No one dared object any longer. Overcome. Overcome by the intense shock, Takeko, Umeko, and their husbands all lost composure and had forgotten their usual pettiness. Then, Furudate, with trembling fingers, tore open the all-important envelope. With the low but resonant voice, he began to read the will. "I, Sahe Inugami, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Article 1. I give and bequeath the 3 heirlooms of the Inugami clan, an axe, zither, and chrysanthemum, which signify the right to inherit all my property and any business enterprise owned or controlled by me, to Tamayo Nonomiya, subject to the conditions set forth in the following articles. The color drained from Tamayo's lovely face. The others' faces in the room turned pale as well, and their hate-filled gazes pierced Tamayo like flaming arrows. Furudate, however, paid no heed and continued. Article 2. Tamayo Nonomiya must marry one of my 3 grandsons, Kiyo Inugami, Take Inugami, or Tomo Inugami. The choice will be hers to make. However, if she refuses to marry any of them and instead chooses to marry another, she shall forfeit her right to inherit the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum. In other words, all the Inugami property businesses would fall to whichever of the 3 Inugami grandsons, Kiyo, Take, or Tomo, could win Tamayo's love. Kindaichi shuddered with an indefinable excitement, but the will had more strange surprises in store. Dun dun dun! It's Knives Out, Japanese version. The blood-colored will. Next chapter. Blood-colored will. With shaking voice, Furudate continued reading the will. Article 3. Tamayo Nonomiya must choose to marry either Kiyo Inugami, Take Inugami, or Tomo Inugami within 3 months of the date of the reading of this will. If the one she chooses refuses to marry her, he will forfeit all claims to my estate. Therefore, if Kiyo, Take, and Tomo all refuse to marry Tamayo, or if all 3 predecease her, Tamayo shall be released from the condition set forth Article 2 and shall be free to marry anyone she wishes. The atmosphere in the room grew even more strained. Tamayo, as white as a sheet, bent her head low, but her quivering shoulders revealed her intense excitement. The hostile looks of the Inugami shot in her direction grew increasingly overt and venomous. If looks could kill, Tamayo would have been dead on the spot. Within this intense, dangerous atmosphere, Furudate's shaky but resonant voice continued like a chant summoning the evil spirits of revenge from the depths of hell. Article 4. If Tamayo Nonomiya forfeits or loses the right to inherit the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum, or if she dies before and within 3 months of the date of the reading of this will, any business enterprises owned or controlled by me shall pass to Kiyo Inugami. Take Inugami and Tomo Inugami shall assist Kiyo in the management of the businesses from the positions their fathers now occupy. The remainder of my estate shall be divided evenly into 5 shares of the Inugami Foundation, with 1 share each to given to Kiyo, Take, and Tomo, and the remaining 2 shares to be given to Shizuma Aonuma, the son of Kikuno Aonuma. Each party receiving a share of my estate, however, must donate 20% of that share to the Inugami Foundation. Shizuma Aonuma, the son of Kikuno Aonuma, Kindaichi contorted his face, puzzled at the mention of these 2 new names. His surprise, however, could not compare with the shock felt by the others in the room, for whom the revelation seems devastating. They all grew pale the instant Furudate uttered these names, but the blow appeared to be particularly severe for Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko, who seemed as if fell by force violently enough to literally knock them to the ground. After a while, however, they exchanged glances and eyes consumed by hatred, a hatred no less intense than that which settled within them the moment they learned everything would go to Tamayo. Who was this Shizuma Aonuma? Kindaichi had perused the life of Sahei Inugami repeatedly, but had never come across such a name. Shizuma, the son of Kikuno Aonuma. What kind of connections did he have with Sahei that he should be the recipient of such fabulous generosity? Then too, why did Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko burn with such hatred when they heard the name? Were they simply angry that someone would rob their sons of a share of wealth? No, that was, Kindaichi felt for sure, a more deep-seated reason. Kindaichi sat contemplating the faces of the members of the Inugami clan with a mixture of intense interest and curiosity until Furudate coughed lightly and began reading the will again. Article 5. The Inugami Foundation shall make every effort to locate Shizuma Aonuma within 3 months of the date of reading of this will. If it is unable to locate him during this time, or if it confirms his death, the entire share of my estate that he would receive shall be donated into the Inugami Foundation. If Shizuma Aonuma is not found living within Japan, but if the possibility exists of his survival overseas, that amount shall be retained by the Inugami Foundation for 3 years from the date of the reading of this will. If Shizuma returned to Japan during this time, his share shall pass to him, but if he does not return, his share shall pass to the Inugami Foundation. The room was hushed. The silence was unnerving. The ineffable evil pervading the frozen stillness made Kindaichi's blood run cold. After a pause, Furudate continued once again. Article 6. If Tamayo Nonomiya loses the right to inherit the X, Zither, and Chrysanthemum, or if she dies before or within 3 months of the reading of this will, and if Kiyo, Take, and Tomo also dies, all my property and any business enterprise owned or controlled by me shall be managed in the following way. First, if Kiyo dies, any business enterprise owned or controlled by me shall pass to Take and Tomo, who shall be equal partners. They shall have equal authority and shall continue this business enterprise and make concerted efforts to develop them further. The share of the remainder of my estate that would have passed to Kiyo, however, shall pass to Shizuma Aonuma. Second, if either Take or Tomo dies, his share also passed to Shizuma Aonuma. Thus, if any one of my 3 grandsons dies, the share that the deceased would have received shall pass to Shizuma Aonuma. That share shall be managed as specified in Article 5, depending on Shizuma's survival or death. However, if Kiyo, Take, and Tomo all die, both the remainder of my estate and any business enterprise owned or controlled by me shall pass to Shizuma Aonuma, together with the 3 heirlooms, the axe, the zither, and chrysanthemum. Sahei's will actually continue much longer, like a puzzle exploring all possibilities, combinations of the death or survival of the 5 people named in the will: Tamayo, the 3 cousins, Kiyo, Take, and Tomo, and the man named Shizuma Aonuma. I have omitted further reiteration of the specific conditions, however, because that would become tedious and overly digressive. Let it suffice to say that Tamayo's position of almost absolute advantage was immediately obvious to everyone. It was unthinkable that Tamayo, young and healthy as she was, would die in the next 3 months. That being the case, the decision as to who would actually inherit the entire Inugami's estate and the business would be hers alone to make. In other words, the fates of Kiyo, Take, and Tomo depended on her decision. Besides the power given to Tamayo, the other remarkable aspect of the will was the name Shizuma Aonuma. For anyone inspecting the will closely would realize that his position was second only to Tamayo. Kiyo, Take, and Tomo could receive a share of their grandfather's fortune without being affected by Tamayo's opinion of them, only if she forfeited her right or died. And if that happened, then Shizuma would suddenly come into the picture. True, he would not be able to participate in the Inugami's businesses, but the division in the estate, his share, would amount to twice that received by each of the other 3. Moreover, Although no benefit would accrue to Kiyo or his two cousins if Shizuma died, if the reverse were to occur, that is, if Kiyo, Take, or Tomo should die, the dead man's share would go right into Shizuma's pocket. What's more, if Tamayo and all three cousins were to die, then everything, the entire Inugami estate, all the businesses, would pass directly to this mysterious person called Shizuma Aonuma. In short, according to the terms of will, all Sahe's fortune and businesses would first to be under Tamayo's control, and, if it should come to this, would ultimately go to Shizuma. Within the scheme, there was no possible way that Kiyo, Take, or Tomo could monopolize the property and businesses of the Inugami clan. Even if one cousin were to survive and all the rest, including Tamayo and Shizuma, were to die, he still would not receive all family fortune because the share would have gone to Shizuma, would then be donated directly into the Inugami Foundation. What a strange will! What a cursed, malicious will! Kindaichi could now understand why Furudate had feared that it would hurl the members of the clan into conflict, kin against kin. Was Sahe really sound of mind when he wrote this will? If he was, then why was he so cold to his own blood grandchildren, yet so kind to Tamayo, descended from his revered benefactor, though she may be, as well as this unknown name, Shizuma Aonuma? No, it was not just Sahe's three grandsons that slighted by his will. Their mothers and fathers had been given less considerations, completely ignored. In fact, Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko were Sahe's blood daughters, but they have been completely left out in the cold. Sahe was said to have been cold to his daughters in his life, but his coldness would be this extreme. Kindaichi, swept with the horrible, powerful sensation, sat studying the faces of the family members. The sinister mask with its supernatural aura prevented Kindaichi from reading the expression on Kiyo's face, but the intensity of the shock he had received was apparent in the fine trembling of his shoulders. The hands he held in his knees shook violently as if with fever. Sweat began to pour from beneath his mask, streaming down from his chin to his throat. Take, with his squarish build, stared at a point on the floor in front of him in a wide-eyed daze. Even this arrogant and insolent man seemed overwhelmed by his grandfather's peculiar will. His face, too, was covered with sweat. Tomo, sly and insincere, could not be still for a moment. He shook his leg incessantly, in a way that would irritate even a casual observer, and he rapidly glanced now here, now there, spying on the faces of the others in the room. His eyes were drawn, as if by a magnet, to Tamayo, and his thin lips curved upwards into a faint smile that contained both hope and anxiety. Take's younger sister, Sayoko, sat with attention riveted on Tomo. With bated breath, her entire body tense, she watched her cousins in sincere manner, sending silent prayers and appeals into his direction. Realizing their ineffectiveness, and seeing him ogling Tamayo, however, she bit her lip hard and looked down sadly. Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko were fury incarnate. Their bodies seemed ready to burst with the darkest emotion, hatred, and no doubt for the dead Sahe. Then, when they remembered that the object of the hatred was no longer there to receive it, they redirect their animosity towards Tamayo. How their eyes blazed with anger at the poor girl. Toranosuke, Takeko's husband, at first glance seemed collected, but his florid face, which grew even more flushed and oily, revealed that he too was consumed with wrath. He looked like he might be felled by a stroke at any time. His malevolent... Thank you, Sistro. Thank you. His malevolent glare was like poison darts directed at everyone except his wife and children. Kokichi, Umeko's husband, had eyes like stray dogs that had been beaten and tormented all his life, nervously, as if afraid, and apparently totally dejected. He studied the expressions of the others in the room. Yet, just below the surface, one could see a treacherous nature that could not be lightly dismissed. He seemed to harbor malice towards everyone except his own son, Tomo. He even glared at his wife. Finally, there was Tamayo. Her attitude when reading the will was finally over was something to behold. He had gradually regained her composure as Furudate had gone through the articles one by one, and by the time he had finished, she was still pale, but was in no way daunted or agitated. Tamayo sat perfectly poised, silent and alone, like a beautiful clay figure. Did she not notice the looks of hatred of the Inugami shot at her like fiery arrows? She sat, poised and silent, yet in her eyes there was a strange light, as if in a trance she was pursuing a dream. Suddenly someone shouted, "I don't believe it! I don't believe it! This will is fake!" Kindaichi looked in surprise towards the voice. It was Sahei's oldest daughter, Matsuko. "No, no, that's not father's real will. Someone... She took a breath. Someone's plot to steal the Inugami's fortune. It's a complete forgery!" Her shrieking voice filled the room. Furudate... Sorry. Furudate's eyebrows twitched and he began to cough. Oh, sorry. Furudate's eyebrow twitched and he began to cough and mumble at the same time. Promptly regaining his composure, however, he took out his handkerchief, wiped his mouth, and spoke in deliberate, calm, admonishing tone. "Mrs. Matsuko, I too cannot help but wish that this will were forgery, or that even if it does reflect Mr. Inugami's true wishes, there were some flaws in its format that would make it legally invalid. But, Mrs. Matsuko, no, let me make this clear, not only to Mrs. Matsuko, but to all of you. This will is absolutely genuine and completely satisfies all legal requirements. If any of you have any objections to this will and intend to contest it in the court, that's up to you. But let me tell you, you will probably lose your case. This will is perfectly binding. No matter what you say, the spirits of this will must be followed and the letter and its instructions carried out in full." So, Furudate explained slowly and deliberately, looking one by one at all the family members, starting with the masked Kyo. Finally, his gaze reached Kindaichi. Seeing the uneasiness, anxiety, fear, and even more the unspoken appeal that issued forth from Furudate's eyes, Kindaichi nodded slightly. Then, as he looked once again at the lawyer's hands clutching the document, he felt a nameless horror. It was as if blood was oozing from the pages of the will. The next chapter. The family tree. Well, like a lone raindrop that creeps along the eaves of a roof and then falls, the word dropped, forlorn and cheerless, from Kindaichi's lips. Well, after a while, Furudate echoed with a voice as shadowed with a gloom as helpless as Kindaichi's. That said, they both remained silent, gazing at the imposing structure of the Inugami's villa down by the lake, as the fast-falling mountain twilight of autumn tinged the vast estate with a warm brown hue. Perhaps for Furudate it looked more like an evil veil of black that gradually cloaked it. Kindaichi noticed the fine shivers that crept up the lawyer's legs. The wind must have picked up, For a little ripple rose and scattered over the water's surface. Furudate, like anyone who had just lived through a crisis, had abandoned himself to a weary inertia, as if at any moment he would completely lose his capacity to concentrate. Well? Once again he asked in a gloomy, mechanical voice. They had taken leave of the Inugami's house after the reading of the will, their hearts unbearably heavy from the hopeless, deplorable enmity that the will had generated. They had both automatically turned their steps towards the Nasu Inn without saying a word. Then, returning together to Kindaichi's room, they had seated themselves in the wicker chairs on the balcony and had remained sitting there in total silence for a considerable time. Kindaichi had dangling from his mouth a cigarette that he had completely forgotten to smoke and oblivious to the fact that it had gone out on him and had never even relit. Finally, he hurled it into the ashtray, and with a squeak from his chair, he leaned forward. "All right, Mr. Furudate, tell me what you are thinking. You have read the will, so your duties now are over. No secret anymore, so please let everything out. Tell me everything you have been holding back about that will." Furudate looked at Kindaichi's face with a dark, almost frightened expression. "Mr. Kindaichi, you're absolutely right. There's no need to keep anything secret now, but where should I begin?" "Let's continue where we left off," Kindaichi answered in a soft but firm voice. "What we were talking about in this room before you left for the Inugami's villa. Mr. Furudate, you suspect Tamayo of being the one who bribed with Mr. Wakabayashi and who secretly read the will, don't you?" Furudate started as if someone had touched a painful nerve, but breathlessly he countered at once. "Why do you say that? No, I haven't the faintest idea who bribed Wakabayashi or who read the will. I'm not even sure anybody did anything of the kind." "Oh, come on now, Mr. Furudate. It's too late to take back what you said. You know Tamayo repeated mishaps couldn't be accidents. Surely you don't think." "Right, exactly." Furudate seems to regain his energy somewhat. "That's exactly what I mean. Don't those so-called accidents prove that Tamayo isn't the one who bribed Wakabayashi? Supposing that is, there really was someone who bribed Wakabayashi and read the will. Kindaichi smiled meaningfully. Kindaichi smiled meaningfully. But then, why has Tamayo been in danger so many times and had so many misadventures that very well could have proved fatal? Because the person who read the will was trying to kill her. After all, Tamayo is like a thorn in the side for the Inugami clan. So as long as she's alive, she's the one who will decide the heir to the family fortune. But if that's the case, why have the attempts always failed? The viper in the bedroom, the faulty brakes, and the third accident on the other day on the boat, the attempts on her life have never succeeded. Why isn't the culprit doing a better job? Furudate stared at Kindaichi with a wild look, his nostrils wide and his brow wet with perspiration. Finally, he whispered in a throaty voice, "Mr. Kindaichi, I don't know what you mean. What on earth are you?" Kindaichi slowly shook his head. "Yes, you do, Mr. Furudate. You know, but you're denying it. I know you must have thought this way too, to that person who threw the viper into the bedroom. The person who tampered the brakes, the person who bored a hole in the boat and plugged it with putty was none other than Tamayo herself." "But what for? Why would she do such a thing?" "To set the scene for future events." "Future events?" "The triple murders of Kiyo, Take, and Tomo." Furudate began perspiring even more freely, the sweat pouring from his brow and over his cheeks in numerous little rivulets. Without even thinking to wipe his face, he sat grasping both his arms of the wicker chair tightly as if he would spring out of it at any time. "The triple murders of Kiyo, Take, and Tomo? Who are you suggesting is going to kill them?" And what does this have to do with Tamayo's accidents? Listen to me, Mr. Furudate. Tamayo has been given an enormous fortune. She has been bequeathed tremendous power, but there's a condition attached. She has to marry Kiyo Takeotomo. That is, unless all three of them die or all three of them refuse to marry her. The last possibility, of course, would never happen. With Tamayo being so beautiful and what's more, with the person who marries her being entitled to the enormous wealth and power of Inugami clan, one would have to be crazy or stupid to refuse such a marriage. Already today, in that room where we sat, I clearly saw Tomo was making a move on Tamayo with my very own eyes. So? Furudate retorted. He seemed to be challenging Kindaichi. So, what if Tamayo dislikes all three of them, or has some other lover? Let's say Tamayo doesn't want to marry any of them, but of course, she doesn't want to lose the Inugami's fortune either. So if Tamayo is doomed unless those three dies. So she decides to kill them one by one, and she stages those repeated accidents as a preparatory move, so she can assume the role of another intended victim when the murders eventually take place. Mr. Kindaichi, Furudate breathed rapidly as if trying to expel some red hot mass inside him. Then he said with emotion, "You are a terrible man. How can you let such horrible thought dwell in your mind? Is everyone in your line of work so suspicious?" Kindaichi smiled sadly and shook his head. "No, I'm not being suspicious. I'm just pursuing possibilities that such a scenario could be the case. We can pursue the opposite possibility as well, say Tamayo's strange accidents. In fact, do not involve pretense or deception on her part, but someone really is trying to kill her. In that case, who is the culprit and what does he or she have in mind? In that case, all three men, Kiyo, Take, and Tomo, are suspect. In other words, if one of the three has no confidence at all of winning Tamayo for himself, would that person stand by twiddling his thumb while Tamayo marries one of the other two? As soon as any one of the three marries Tamayo, the other two are totally deprived of any of the Inugami's fortune. So, killing Tamayo would mean that he would at least come into some money. You are a terrible man, Mr. Kindaichi. Terrible! But what you are saying is all just fantasy. It's only in a novel that a person can be so cold-blooded. No. Whoever it is already shown how cold-blooded he or she can be. Remember? Someone has already murdered Mr. Wakabayashi in a very cold-blooded way. Incidentally, if we pursue possibilities that I just mentioned, it is not just Kiyo, Take, or Tomo who are suspects, but also their parents and even Take's sisters as well. By making sure their son or brother receive a share of inheritance, they are letting themselves in for a share too. The question then is, who had the best, surest chance to toss a viper into Tamayo's bedroom, tamper with her car, and bore a hole in her boat? Mr. Furudate, don't you have any idea? Furudate glanced again in consternation at Kindaichi, and a look of obvious confusion began to spread over his face. Aha! Mr. Furudate, I see what you are thinking of a particular person. Who is it? No, I don't know. As for who had the chance, all of them did. All of them? Yes, except Kiyo, who just came back. Mr. Kindaichi, the family members have been gathering here in Nasu every month for Sahei's memorial services. Of course, they don't come to pay homage to the old man. They come here once a month because they want to find out what the others are up to and because they don't want to lose out on anything. And Tamayo's accident invariably happen when they are here, this time too. Kindaichi gave a shrill whistle and started to scratch his head vigorously. This is certainly a very interesting case, Mr. Furudate. No matter who the perpetrator is or he or she keeps us guessing. Kindaichi remained lost in thought, violently scratching his head with increasingly tangled mop of hair. Finally, he remembered Furudate's presence. He turned towards the lawyer, who was staring at him aghast, and smiled sheepishly. Excuse me, he laughed. It's a habit of mine when I'm excited. I hope you won't hold it against me. Anyhow, as I was saying, we have considered two possibilities. The possibility that Tamayo's strange accidents are staged performances and the possibility that they are not. By the way, if the latter is the case, then there is another strong suspect. Of course, whether he would have the chance to read the will is another question. Who's that? Shizuma Aonuma. A faint cry escaped Furudate's taut lips. Setting aside whether he had the chance or not, Shizuma has the strongest motive, if of any, to want Tamayo dead. Unless she dies, he won't be included at all in this scheme of inheritance. So he can't make Tamayo reject Sahei's grandsons. He has to kill her first if he wants to be assured of a share of the money. Then, if the three grandsons die after that, he would get everything. All Sahei's fortune and businesses. Mr. Furudate, Kindaichi spoke with emphasis. Who is this Shizuma Aonuma? What connection does he have with Sahei? And why is he being shown such generosity? Furudate sighed deeply, wiping his clammy brow with his handkerchief. He nodded with a gloomy expression. Shizuma Aonuma was the reason Sahei had so much bitterness and anguish in his heart in his later years. It's no wonder he gave Shizuma such an important role in the will. Shizuma is... The words seemed to stick in Furudate's throat. Then, clearing his throat, he murmured almost in a stammer. Shizuma is Sahei's illegitimate son. Kindaichi raised his eyebrow high in surprise. His son? Yes, his only son. But then, why? I mean, that wasn't even mentioned in his biography. Of course not. Writing about that would mean exposing what Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko did, their cruel, evil deed. Furudate began his tale in an emotionless voice, as if reciting something from memory. When he was in his 50s, Sahei fell in love for the first time in his life. He already had 3 mistresses, with whom he had sired Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko, but he did not particularly love any of them. He just kept them by his side to satisfy his physical needs. But then, when he was past 50, he fell deeply in love with a woman for the first time in his life. Her name was Kikuno Aonuma, and she worked at the Inugami silk mill. They say she was even younger than Matsuko. After a while, Kikuko became pregnant, throwing Sahei's 3 daughters into a panic. Having different mothers as they did, they have never been close even as children. No, in fact, they had constantly fought and feuded with each other like sworn enemies. But now, at least in regard to Kikuno, they joined forces in a united effort. They weren't that dismayed by her pregnancy. Why? Why would they care if she was pregnant? Furudate smiled warily. Isn't it obvious? What if Kikuno had a boy? Sahei was totally infatuated with her, and if she were to give him the son he had always wanted, he might decide to marry her legally. Then the boy would steal the entire Inugami's fortune from Dan. I see. Kindaichi controlled the shudder he felt rising within him. He nodded slowly and deeply. So the 3 daughters formed an alliance and began to hound Kikuno, tormenting her, abusing her fiercely in unspeakable ways. Kikuno finally found it unbearable. She thought that if this continued, the 3 of them would torment her to death in the end, so she ran away. Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko were relieved, but then they found out, after Kikuno left, that Sahei had given her the 3 Inugami heirlooms, the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum. Yes, I was going to ask about those. What are the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum? Let me explain that later. As the will said, though they are the Inugami family treasures, which signifies the right of the inheritance. The three half-sisters found out that Sahe had given them to Kikuno and told her that if she had a son, she should come back with the heirlooms and demand her rights. It's no wonder the three of them panicked even more. When they heard that Kikuno had indeed safely given birth to a boy, they could no longer hold back their fury and rushed to Kikuno like demons from hell. Even though she had just given birth, they forced her to sign a statement saying that Sahe was not the father of the child, and then retrieved the three heirlooms and went triumphantly on their way. That's why Sahe was as cold as ice to Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko in his latter years. Kindaichi recalled the malicious features of the three women, imagining how they might have been in their youth when they could have more spirit and spite. He felt his flesh crawl. I see. What happened to Kikuno and the baby? Well, the terrifying experience must have made quite an impression on Kikuno. She had signed the statement, but who knew what other harm could come to her? So she took her baby, Shizuma, and disappeared without a trace. Even now, we have no idea where mother and son are. If he's living, Shizuma would be 29, the same age as Akio. Furudate finished his tale and sighed morosely. A dark thought overwhelmed Kindaichi. Perhaps Sahe's will was written with horrible purpose in mind from the first. Did the old man deliberately write such an extraordinary will to cause discord among Matsuko, Takeko, and Umeko, a blood feud that will continue for years and years to come? Kindaichi pondered what he had heard, crushed by the depressing thoughts, but eventually, taking out a pen and paper, he began sketching the Inugami family tree. For a long time, he sat staring at the chart, as if there were something to discover there. So this was the inception of the unearthly series of murders that befell the Inugami clan. The curtains had risen on the first act of this blood-soaked tragedy. The next chapter, The Mysterious Monkey. Sahe's unusual will quickly become a hot topic for greedy journalists. Thanks to the effort of certain news agency, the will, contents, and accounts of a bitter enmity it had caused among the family members were scattered far and wide to newspapers throughout the country. Of course, the major dailies did not choose to publish articles about such private matters, but the second or third-rate tabloids, without exception, splashed the story all over their pages with sensational and misleading exaggerations. As a result, the inheritance of Sahe Inugami's fortune was no longer just a topic of local interest, but had ballooned into a national concern. Anyone who was even the least bit inquisitive watched the curiosity, waiting to see whom this Tamayo no Nomiya would choose for a husband. Some even made wagers among themselves. The Inugami villa, while thus basked in the national spotlight, stood as hushed in the suffocating silence as ever by the shores of Lake Nasu. Takeko, Umeko, and their families were still at the villa, but there was almost no communication between them and Matsuko and Kyo. Each family, when not secluded in their own quarters, tried to read the other faces and minds. Inside the mansions there now brewed four separate storms, with interests interlocking in complex ways. Matsuko and Kyo, Takeko's family, Umeko's family, and Tamayo. Imagine Tamayo's miserable situation. Matsuko, Takeko, Umeko, and their families hated each other like bitter enemies. But even so, they were united in their hatred for Tamayo. Not one of them, however, would express that animosity openly, though they concealed daggers of jealousy in their hearts. The three half-sisters were all flattery and smiles towards Tamayo, then bitterly resenting their being forced to lavish such false compliments on this young orphan. Their hatred towards her doubled in intensity. No doubt egged on by their parents, Take and Tomo went daily to pay their respect to Tamayo. Take, being the epitome of arrogance, appeared exceedingly confident from the first and did not jabber on the obvious insincere flattery. But Tomo, slight and smart, was like a dog nearly wagging its tail off. He would run around Tamayo, sit up and shake hands and whimper obligingly, trying to curry favor with her. Through all this, Tamayo was magnificent. She could feel the family's hatred and curses directed against her with her whole being, as sensitively as moist skin would feel electricity, yet she seemed not in the least daunted. She remained elegant and noble, and her attitude towards both the self-confident Take and shifty Tomo seemed to have changed little, if at all, with the reading of the will, except that now she never forgot to have Monkey in adjoining room when either of them visited her in her quarters. Neither did Tamayo shrink from the masked Kyo, since he never came to visit her of his own accord. She would sometimes call on him in his room, in encounters that were rumored to be extremely strange. Again, Tamayo was always accompanied by Monkey. Kyo, too, was never alone, always having his mother by his side when he met with Tamayo. Thus, the meetings between Kyo and Tamayo would take place with Matsuko and Monkey present. Invariably, they would lapse into an uncomfortable silence. Kyo, with a sinister mask, perhaps self-conscious of his hideous appearance, had hardly ever said a word. It was therefore mostly Tamayo would speak, but when her words seemed to end in question or refer to Kyo's past, Matsuko was always intervene and answer for her son, responding with seeming frivolity and deftly maneuvering the subject in another direction. When this happened, Tamayo would pale visibly, and she would sometimes begin to tremble slightly. Be that as it may, it was only thanks to Monkey that nothing untoward happened to Tamayo while living in the same villa as Take and Tomo, both of whom were noticeably impatient to secure her love. The easiest and fastest way to possess Tamayo would be to take her physically by force, if necessary. If not beneath either of these men to consider such a plan, more than a few times in fact, they wanted to make lewd advances. That they failed to carry out their intentions was due to only Monkey's presence. If Take or Tomo had tried anything so outrageous, that ugly giant would no doubt have broken his neck. You want to know about Monkey? Furudate began explaining about this mysterious character one day. That's not his real name, of course. As you know, he looks just like one, though. So people have called him that since he was a boy. It comes to seem like his real name. I, for one, don't even remember what his real name is. He was orphaned when he was still very small, so Tamayo's mother, feeling sorry for him, took him in and raised him. Yes, he and Tamayo was brought up together from a very young age, so when Tamayo's parents died and Sahei brought her to the Inugami home, Monkey came with her. He's slightly mentally handicapped and is blindly loyal to Tamayo and served her with the utmost devotion. He would do anything she asked him to do. If she asked him to kill, he would do it gladly. These last words must have popped out from Furudate's mouth inadvertently. Surely, he only wanted to describe how dedicated Monkey was to Tamayo. The moment they were uttered, however, both speaker and listener looked up as if jerked awake and stared at each other. Furudate, obviously regretting his word of choice, coughed awkwardly, and Kindaichi changed the topic for him. By the way, I heard Monkey is in charge of the chrysanthemums at the Inugami's estate. Yes, did you see them? He might not be very bright, but he has a remarkable talent for growing chrysanthemums. Tamayo's father, who was the priest of Nasu Shrine, taught him how because the chrysanthemum is historically significant to both Nasu Shrine and the Inugami clan. Remember? The axe, zither, and chrysanthemum? Yes, I wanted to ask you about those. What's the story behind those three objects? Are they related in some way to Nasu Shrine as well? Oh yes. The axe refers to the yoki, the small hatchet used to chop firewood. The zither to the koto, the thin string musical instrument, and the chrysanthemum is the flower kiku. Originally, they were the three sacred treasures of Nasu Shrine. As you can see, when When the words were spoken together, Yoki koto kiku, they are homonymous with we hear good tidings. I understand that this phrase is also the family's motto of the kabuki actor Kikugoro. Well, I'm sure the treasure of Nasu Shrine have nothing to do with any kabuki actor, but Daini Nonomiya, Sahei's benefactor, and Tamayo's grandfather, has thought of this same auspicious phrase and had a craftsman made a golden axe, zither, and chrysanthemum to be consecrated as the sacred treasures of the shrine. Then later, when Sahei started his business, Daini presented them and the motto to Sahei to wish him success so that now they have become the heirlooms of the Inugami clan. And where are they now? The Inugami Foundation has them in safekeeping. Eventually, when Tamayo selects a husband from among Kiyotake or Tomo, they will be given to him. The heirlooms themselves are only little gold miniatures, each about 30 centimeters in height. Furudate continued with a frown. Since it was Daini who originally presented the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum to Sahei, I suppose I can understand why the old man might have wanted to return them to Daini's descendants after his own death. But things get terribly complicated because the Inugami fortune and deep businesses are attached to them. I have to wonder why Sahei ever devised such a will, Furudate murmured with a sigh. Kindaichi looked thoughtfully and said, I see. So the words for an axe, zither, and chrysanthemum, Yoki koto kiku, and the miniatures themselves have no particular significance. That is, if they didn't represent the right to inherit the Inugami fortune. Exactly. The heirlooms are golden, but only gold-plated, so they are not worth much in and of themselves. It's what the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum represents that give them their value. So Furudate quickly affirmed, but in retrospect, his answer could not have been more off the mark, for the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum, Yoki koto kiku, those very words would come to haunt them with their horrible significance. Yoki koto kiku. That auspicious motto indeed had watched over the Inugami clan while Sahei had been alive. Did it still protect them with its power now that the old man was dead? No. Looking back on all that was to occur, we can say that it no longer protected, but in fact now cursed, the Inugami clan. Yet, even our astute Kindaichi remained completely unaware of this until those series of nightmarish incidents gradually opened his eyes. By the way, does it look like you'll be able to locate Shizuma Aonuma? I don't know. Even before I read the will, I made arrangements across the country to search for him, but so far we haven't a clue. Even if he safely reached adulthood, who knows if he's still alive or not? After the war we had just gone through. Perhaps the demons of hell were in mischievous moods, for all at once Kindaichi was struck by an extraordinary thought, disconcerted at the seemingly ridiculousness of his own notion. He nonetheless could not get it out of his mind. Mr. Furudate, you said that Monkey was an orphan, didn't you? And in age, he would be just about right. Is Monkey's family background clearly known? Hearing Kindaichi's question, Furudate widened his eyes appalled. He remained staring at Kindaichi for a while, but then gasped. What are you saying, Mr. Kindaichi? Are you saying that Monkey is Shizuma? That's preposterous. No doubt you are right. The thought that just popped into my head. No, I'm more than happy to retract my question. I'm not thinking straight today. I just thought perhaps Sahei asked Tamayo's mother to raise the illegitimate child. If that were the case, though, I'm sure someone would have noticed by now. Of course. Besides, as I've told you, Sahei was an extremely handsome man. Kikuno too, although I've never met her, must have been attractive, considering how Sahei lost his head over her. There's no way an ugly child's monkey could have been born between them. He's just a master chrysanthemum grower who's not very bright, and now he's engrossed in making chrysanthemum dolls. Chrysanthemum dolls? Kindaichi screwed up his face. Yes, those dolls on which they arranged chrysanthemums of different hues to represent the kimonos and so forth. Once before, at Sahei's command, Monkey made a whole series of chrysanthemum dolls to depict scenes from Sahei's life. He must have remembered that because he proclaimed to anyone that he would make chrysanthemum dolls again this year, though not, of course, on a large as a scale as before. Monkey's alright, neither harmful nor helpful, so long as he isn't angered. Now that I think about it though, I haven't once heard about his family background. Alright, then if you have even an ounce of doubt, I'll find out the circumstances of his birth. Furudate's expression too had gradually grown troubled. Next chapter. The votive handprint. November 15. A half month since Kiyo's return and almost a month since Kindaichi's arrival in Nasu. The day when the Inugami's blood first flowed and the day when the devil finally commenced to act. Before turning the subject to death, however, let us first recount an incident that might have been the prelude to the murder. Mr. Kindaichi, you have a guest. It was about 3 in the afternoon. Having dragged his wicker chair onto the balcony as usual, Kindaichi sat lost in thoughts, almost nodding off, when his drowsy musing was interrupted by the maid's voice. A guest? Who is it? It's Mr. Furudate. If it's Mr. Furudate, tell him to come up. No, he's waiting for you in his car. He says that he's going somewhere and would like you to accompany him if you don't mind. Kindaichi sprang out of his chair, then changed from his robe into his tired kimono and hakama trousers. He thrust a bowler crumpled beyond recognition over his tousled hair and rushed out the front door of the inn. A car was parked in front, and poking his head out of one of the window is Furudate. Sorry to keep you waiting. Where are we going? Trotting up to the car, Kindaichi nonchalantly placed his foot on the running board and then caught his breath in surprise. Furudate was not alone. Sitting in the car with him were the thick-set Take and the fox-like Tomo. Well, hello. I didn't know you two were going too. Get in, said Furudate, moving the spare pull-down seat so Kindaichi could sit down next to Tomo. The car started moving immediately. So, where are you off together? Kindaichi asked. To Nasu Shrine. The shrine? What for? Yes, well, let me tell you about that when we get there. Perhaps concerned about the driver's presence, Furudate coughed awkwardly and avoiding the question. Take sat silently with his arm crossed, his lips pulled tight in a scowl, while Tomo kept shaking his stick incessantly, whistling a tune in direction of the window. The vibrations from Tomo's twitching augmented the jolts of the car and made Kindaichi squirm on his seat. Nasu Shrine was located about 4 kilometers from the center of the town. Already the car had gone past 2 limits and was speeding through the fields of bare branch mulberry shrubs. Acres of rice paddies extended beyond the fields, but with the harbors over the water drain, there was a sorry sight. Black stubble picking out in the mud. Still further beyond the rice paddies, one could glimpse the lake with its its waters glistening like mirror. Biting cold gusts blew from its direction. Winter was soon quick to come to the Shinshu region. The peak of Mount Fuji, soaring in the distance above the mulberry fields, was already white in snow. The car soon pulled up in front of the large plain wood of the gated shrine. Nasu Shrine had a long and distinguished history. Towering cedar tree loom over its extensive ground, and deep-colored moss covered its row of stone lanterns. As Kindaichi proceeded up the path of pebbles that crunched under his feet, he felt the bracing tension of the atmosphere overtaking him. Take frowned as sourly as usual. Tomo's eyes still darted in all directions, but no one said a word. They soon reached the shrine office. Hello, I heard the car, so I thought it might be you. A middle a middle-aged man wearing a white kimono and a pair of pale yellow hakama trousers came out of the office. With his short hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he looked unremarkable. But as Kindaichi soon learned, this is Taisuke Oyama, the priest of Nasu Shrine. The priest led them deep into the building to an aseptically clean 8-mat tatami room. In the middle of it was a brazier filled with warming fire. The garden outside was filled with magnificent chrysanthemum blooms which scented the air with a faint fragrance. As soon as they had seated themselves and exchanged greetings, Tomo impatiently leaned forward and said, Mr. Oyama, I don't mean to rush you, but could you just show us what we came to see? The priest, looking uncertain, glanced towards Kindaichi. And this gentleman is? Oh, you don't need to worry about Mr. Kindaichi. Furudate interjected. This is Kosuke Kindaichi, and he has been helping us in regard of the current matter. Now, since the two gentlemen are quite eager, could you please? Yes, of course. Please wait here for a moment. The priest left the room but soon returned, reverently holding a small plain wood offering stand on which lay 3 hand scrolls with gold brocade covers. The priest placed the stand before the assembled group and took up the scrolls one by one. This is Mr. Take's scroll, and this is yours, Mr. Tomo. We don't care about our scrolls. Show us Kiyo's, Tomo urged irritably. This is Mr. Kiyo's scroll. Please have a look. In silence, Take took the scroll from the priest, unrolled it and studied it, and then quickly passed it to Tomo. It was a scroll about 40 centimeters wide and 60 centimeters long, and he took it from Take's. Tomo's hand quivered with excitement. Take, you're certain this is Kiyo's scroll, right? Said Tomo to his cousin. Absolutely. The handwriting at the top is grandfather's, and without doubt this is Kiyo's signature. Good. Have a look, Mr. Furudate. As Tomo passed the scroll to the lawyer, Kindaichi, who was sitting next to him, was able to discern its content for the first time. What he saw left him thunderstruck. Pressed on the white silk, the scroll was a right hand print. Above it, in its artistic brushstroke, was written "Success in Battle," while along the left side, in another hand, were the words July 6, 1943, Kiyo Inugami, age 23, male, born in the year of the rooster. The handprint belonged to Kiyo, the man who had lost his face. For the first time, Kindaichi understood why they had come to the shrine, and he felt his heart racing with excitement. Mr. Kindaichi, I want you to have a good look at this too. Furudate pushed the scroll towards Kindaichi. Yes, I saw it just now, but what do you intend to do with it? Isn't it obvious? Said Tomo. We are going to see if that masked man who returned the other day really is Kiyo or not. No two people have the same fingerprints, and a person's fingerprints are the same for life. Even if you must know that. Kindaichi watched Tomo speak, observing his animal-like cruelty, like that of a beast that had spotted its prey and was licking its chop in anticipation. Kindaichi felt his forehead grow clammy with cold sweat. I see. But why does the shrine possess this handprint? In this part of the country, Mr. Kindaichi, Furudate took over and explained, it is a custom for anyone going off to war to come home to this shrine and to offer a votive tablet stamped with his handprint as a prayer for success in battle. Mr. Take and Mr. Tomo here, as well as Mr. Kiyo, did likewise, but since they are closely connected to the Nasu shrine, they dedicated these scrolls instead of tablets. They were stored deep inside the shrine, and we have completely forgotten about them. But Mr. Oyama have remembered and was kind enough to let Mr. Take and Mr. Tomo know in case it should be of some use. Mr. Oyama told them? Noticing how Kindaichi's sharp glance in his direction, the priest became flustered. Yes, well, actually, since there's been some gossip about Mr. Kiyo after his return, I thought if things could be made certain, it would be better. So all of you suspect that the man might not be the real Kiyo? Of course! How can we trust a man with his face torn apart like that? Said Tomo. But his mother, Mrs. Matsuko, declared absolutely. Mr. Kindaichi, you don't know my aunt. If Kiyo was dead, that woman wouldn't hesitate to find a stand-in. She doesn't want to take Take or me to have the Inugami fortune. To prevent that, she would do anything, even swear that an impostor is her real son. Kindaichi felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Alright, Mr. Furudate, I want you to sign your name beside this handprint. Mr. Kindaichi, if you would too. We are going to take this back, get the masked man handprint, and then compare the two so that we don't want anyone to say that we have done anything fraudulent. Please sign here as witnesses. But, what if Kiyo refuses to give you his handprint? Oh, he won't refuse. Take stirred and spoke out at last. If he does, I'll get it by force. His voice was no longer human, but the growl of a beast with blood dripping from its fang. The next chapter, Evil Tidings. November 16. That morning, Kindaichi had overslept as never before, and although it was past 10 o'clock, he was still cuddled between the sheets on his futon. He had overslept because he had been up so late the night before. The previous day, having obtained Kiyo's handprint at Nasu Shrine, Take and Tomo had blustered that they would return to the villa, get a handprint from the man in the strange mask, and ascertain his identity once and for all. They had asked Kindaichi to be present as a witness, but he had refused. If some incident requiring his professional services had already occurred to a member of the Inugami family, he would have felt differently. But at this point, he did not want to risk earning the distrust of anyone, no matter whom, by sticking his nose into their private affair. Fine, it's alright, we have Mr. Furudate, the hulking Take yielded immediately. Tomo the fox, however, insisted. But should the authenticity of this scroll be called upon into question, you will testify that we retrieved from the Nasu Shrine, won't you? Of course. So long as my signature is there, where I placed it, I will stand by it. By the way, Mr. Furudate. Yes? As I said, I feel it wouldn't be proper for me to be present as a witness at this event, but I would like to know as soon as possible what happens. Could you let me know the results, whether the man in the strange mask is indeed Kiyo or not, as soon as you can? Certainly. I'll stop by your inn on my way back. After dropping Kindaichi off at his lodgings, the car headed straight to Inugami estate. It was about 10 in the evening when Furudate, true to his words, came to Kindaichi, and the instant Kindaichi saw the lawyer's face, he asked, "What happened?" He was taken aback by Furudate's dark, stern expression. Furudate shook his head slightly and spat out, "Not good." What? What do you mean? Matsuko wouldn't let Kiyo give us his handprint. She refused? Yes, absolutely. She wouldn't listen to Take and Tomo at all. I'm sure she's not going to change her mind. Not for a while. The only way we could get a new handprint from Kiyo now would be by force, like Take said, and I don't think anyone is willing to go that far. So we weren't able to learn anything definite at all. Kindaichi had a heavy feeling in the pit of his stomach. But, he licked his parched lips. But that would make Take and Tomo even more suspicious. Exactly. That's why I tried to persuade Matsuko until I was blue in the face. But she's not the type to listen to anyone. On the contrary, she grew infuriated with me and made all sort of nasty remarks. She's a stubborn woman, and once she sets her mind on something, she won't be easily persuaded to change it. Furudate sighed a deep dark sigh. Then, as if spitting out something distasteful, she began to relate to Kindaichi the events of the evening. Listening to the lawyer's account, Kindaichi was able to paint the scene vividly in his mind. It was the same 12-mat room where the will had been read. The members of the Inugami clan were assembled in front of Sahei's photograph on the plain wood altar, Kiyo with a sinister rubber mask, Matsuko, and facing them in circle, Take, Tomo, their parents, and Take's sister. Also part of the circle were Tamayo and Furudate. The scroll that has just been retrieved from Nasu's shrine had been placed in front of Kiyo, along with a blank sheet of paper, an inkstone with red ink, and a brush. Kiyo's mask prevented anyone from seeing his expression, but the fine trembling of his shoulders revealed his profound agitation. The eyes of the family members that were turned towards the masked face were full of suspicion and hatred. So, I'm Natsuko. Are you saying that you absolutely refuse to let Kiyo give us his handprint? After a long, dangerous silence, Take spoke as if upbraiding her. His voice was that of a beast with blood dripping from his fangs. Absolutely! Matsuko answered in a suppressed manner. Then, with blazing eyes, she looked around at the others in the room. This is outrageous! Even if his face had changed, there's no doubt this is Kiyo. I guarantee it. I'm his mother, and I should know. What better proof is there? And you go and listen to those ridiculous rumors. No, I refuse to allow it. I won't have it. But Matsuko, take Take's mother, Takeko, interjected from nearby. It was a calm, quiet voice, but one that reverberated with an ample malice. That's all the more reason for Kiyo to give us his handprint. I'm saying I have doubts. I'm not saying that I have doubts about his identity, but it's so hard to keep people from gossiping. You should stop these silly rumors too. I think it's best if Kiyo simply give us his handprint. Umeko, what do you think? Oh yes, I agree with Takeko. If you and Kiyo refuse now, I think people would become even more suspicious. Isn't that right, everybody? Of course it's right. Takeko's husband, Toranosuke, chimed in. That's not just the people outside. If you and Kiyo continue to refuse this now, we would be tempted to get suspicious too. Kokichi, how about you? Yes, that's true. Umeko's husband Kokichi stammered as if intimidated. We certainly don't want to doubt a member of the family, but if Matsuko and Kiyo insist on saying no, we have to believe you have something to hide. Takeko drove in the point with a venomous sneer. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! At that moment, Matsuko shrieked, her voice quivering with rage. Do you realize what you are saying? At least for now, Kiyo is the head of the Inugami clan. If father had not written such a ridiculous will, all the Inugami fame and fortune would be Kiyo's alone, and he's the head of the clan. In the old days, he would have been your lord and your master, and you, Take and Tomo, you have just been like vassals. Yet you, how dare you tell him you want his handprint, his fingerprints, like that's like some sort of common criminal? No, there's no way I'll allow my son to do such disgusting things. No, never. Kiyo, come on, we don't need to stay here. Matsuko stood up indignantly. Take's expression changed to one of fury. And Matsuko, then do you refuse absolutely? Absolutely. Come on, Kiyo. The masked Kiyo stood up falteringly. Matsuko took his hand. Then Matsuko, grinding his teeth, Take shot a vicious remark at the back of Matsuko and Kiyo as they were leaving the room. We can no longer recognize that man as Kiyo. Do as you like. Leading the masked man by the hand, Matsuko stomped out the sliding door. Having heard Furudate's account, Hindaichi began vigorously scratching his head this way and that. A tense situation. Indeed, Furudate answered gloomily. I have to wonder why Matsuko refuses to obstinate. It's true, Take could have broached the subject more tactfully. He did treat Kiyo like a criminal from the start. Matsuko, proud as she is, became incensed, and since she's the type that once she gets her back up is hopelessly stubborn, I guess she couldn't help herself. But the issue being what it is, if that's the real Kiyo, and of course I believe it is, it would have been much better if she had just been a good sport and let them have what they wanted. In other words, We can interpret Matsuko's reaction tonight in one or two ways. Either Take's and Tomo's attitude offended her and made her stubborn, or, as Take and Tomo suspect, the masked man is in fact not Kiyo, and what's more, Matsuko knows it. Furudate nodded with a dark look in his eyes. Of course, I choose the first interpretation, but unless Matsuko gives in and let us take Kiyo's handprint, I can't erase the second interpretation. That horrible suspicion from my mind, no matter how distasteful the thought. Furudate stayed until near midnight talking. Soon after he left, Kindaichi lay down on his futon, but even after he had turned off the light, his eyes refused to close for a long time. The surreal figure of the man in the rubber mask and right hand print pressed on the silk scroll floating before him in the darkness, tormenting him until late into the night. Suddenly, the phone he had placed beside his pillow started ringing loudly, and Kindaichi awoke with a start. Still lying prone between the sheet, he drew the telephone towards him and put the receiver to his ears. It was the manager at the front desk. Room number 17, Mr. Kosuke Kindaichi? Telephone call from Mr. Furudate. Yes, please put him through. Immediately, he heard Furudate's voice on the other end. Hello, Mr. Kindaichi? Sorry to awake you, but I need you to come quickly, very quickly, immediately. Furudate's voice sounded unusually high pitched and shaky. Kindaichi's heart skipped a beat. Come? Come where? The Inugami's villa. I'll send a car for you. Please come right away. Alright, I understand. Mr. Furudate, has something happened? Yes, something has happened. Something terrible has happened. Wakabayashi's prediction has come true, and it's in a very peculiar way. Anyhow, please come here immediately. You will understand everything when you get here. I'll see you soon. A loud click from the receiver and the sound of Furudate's hanging up hurriedly. Kindaichi sprang from his futon and opened one of the shutters to peek outside. It was dark and overcast, as if a grey veil has descended upon the world, and cold rain beat mournfully on the waters of the lake. The Chrysanthemum Garden. In his experience as a private investigator, Kindaichi had been involved in all sorts of cases, and more than a few times he had come face to face with ghastly corpses, the stuff that nightmares are made of. He saw a couple lying drenched in their own blood on their wedding night in the Honjin murders case, and the body of the young girl hung upside down from an old plum tree, and her dead sister stuffed inside a huge temple bell in the Gokumon Island case. In the Nightwalker case, he saw the decapitated corpse of a man and a woman, while in the Yatsuhaka village case, he witnessed many people poisoned or strangled. By now, therefore, Kindaichi should have grown insensitive to corpse, no matter how different or terrifying, but this bizarre murder in the case of the Inugami clan still left him in shock. A car from the Inugami estate arrived not long after Furudate's phone call, so Kindaichi wolfed down his bowl of rice and hurried outside. On the way to the villa, he tried his best to pry something out of the driver, but either because of someone's gag order or true ignorance, his answers were not informative. I really don't know myself, sir. I did hear someone was killed, but I have no idea who it was. Anyhow, the whole place is in an uproar. The car soon pulled up by the front gate of the estate. Apparently, the police had already arrived, for uniformed men, policemen, and plainclothes detectives with grim expressions on their faces were passing in and out of the gate. Furudate came running out immediately. Mr. Kindaichi, thank God you are here. It's happened. It's finally. Having grabbed Kindaichi's arm, he was so agitated he could not go on. Kindaichi's heart turned over, wondering what could have so upset this normally self-possessed lawyer. Mr. Furudate, what on earth? Come this way. Just come take a look. It's horrible. Just a horrible, no sane person. Must be a lunatic or devil himself. For Why such a horrible prank? Furudate was incoherent. With his eyes wild and bloodshot, he seemed possessed, as if he would start foaming at the mouth at any moment, and the hand that grabbed Kindaichi's wrist was burning hot. Kindaichi remained silent as he was half led, half dragged forward by Furudate. Inside the gate, a long driveway extended towards the front door. It was not in that direction that Furudate turned his step, however, but through a side gate into the garden. The original villa, built by Sahe, first felt his company was safely established, was a small structure. Later, however, as the Inugami businesses expanded and Sahe amassed a great fortune, he gradually brought up the surrounding land and continued to add the building until the end. It had become a complex maze with numerous annexes. It was so complex, in fact, that Kindaichi wandered onto the estate alone. He would surely have become lost. Furudate, however, seemed thoroughly acquainted with the grounds and dragged Kindaichi deeper and deeper without any hesitation. Finally, after passing through a European-style outer garden, they entered the Japanese-style inner garden where a crowd of policemen soaked in the rain milled about searching for something. Past this inner garden and then through a stylish bamboo wicket they went when suddenly a magnificent chrysanthemum garden appeared before Kindaichi's eyes. Although Kindaichi was not given the aesthetic appreciation, even he could not help but marvel at its splendor. On the other side of a neatly swept carpet of white sand stood a tastefully designed traditional building, probably a tea house. It was surrounded by rows of chrysanthemum by a lattice awning, and large blooms of various types, spherical, cascading, and single-layered, filled the melancholy rain-drenched garden with their fragrance. "It's over there. It's a horrible sight," Furudate whispered in a high-pitched, nervous voice, still holding on to Kindaichi's arm. In front of the chrysanthemums, just facing the entrance of the tea house, stood several policemen, frozen in silence. Furudate dragged Kindaichi to the spot. "Look, Mr. Kindaichi, look at that face!" Pushing the policeman aside, Kindaichi made his way to the front and stood in front of the chrysanthemums. He recalled what Furudate had once said before. "Monkey? He's a master chrysanthemum grower, and now he's engrossed in making chrysanthemum dolls." Yes, these were Monkey's chrysanthemum dolls, all right, and they were arranged to represent a scene from the Chrysanthemum Garden, a kabuki play about the legendary hero of the medieval Japan. In the center stood the former General Kichi, his long hair tied behind him. Next to him, his Princess Minazuru in flowing long-sleeved kimono. The young servant Torazo and another servant Chienai were crouched in front of Kichi and to the right and left, respectively, while the villain Tankai stood like an evil spirit in semi-darkness towards the back. Taking in the scene at a glance, Kindaichi quickly realized that the faces of the chrysanthemum dolls had all been made to resemble members of the Inugami household. The protagonist Kichi was the diseased Sahe, and Princess Minazuru was Tamayo. The young servant Torazo in the story, actually the hero Lord Ushikawa in disguise, looked just like the masked Kiyo, and the servant Chienai, in fact, the young Lord Retainers was Tomo, and Tankai, the villain, looks like... As Kindaichi peered into the shadowy gloom at the back, he felt his body convulse and become numb, as if shocked by a jolt of electricity. Tankai, the villain, of course, the features were those of a hulking take, but while Tankai should have long hair, this Tankai had his hair cut short and neatly parted on the left, as if he belonged to a modern age. And what a realistic, pale, dark face! Kindaichi jerked as if another jolt of electricity had passed through him, and he unconsciously moved a step closer. That's... He could not get the words out. His tongue seemed stuck to the roof of his mouth. Kindaichi leaned forward over the railing, squeezing its green bamboo stalks as if he could tear them asunder. But at the instant, Tankai's head tottered once, twice, as if nodding, and rolled off his shoulder to the ground. Kindaichi cried, croaking like a frog wings crush, and jumped back in spite of himself. Tankai's no! Take's severed head lay on the ground, the cut surface covered with congealed reddish-black blood, and revealing the shapeless mass inside. It was nauseating, nightmarish head straight from hell. It's... After several seconds of frozen silence, Kindaichi gasped breathlessly. So, Take has been murdered! Furudate and the policeman nodded in silence. And the murderer cut off his head and switched it with the head of a chrysanthemum doll. The lawyer and the policeman nodded again. But why go to such trouble? No one said a word. It's not like it hasn't been done before. Decapitating the victim, we find headless corpse once in a while. But in those cases, the murderer cuts off the head to conceal the identity of the corpse and invariably hides it somewhere else. But why is this head displayed in so conspicuously in such a place like this? That's the question, Mr. Kindaichi. The murderer, whoever it is, murdered Take and for some reason decided not to leave the body untouched but cut off the head, brought it all the way here and exchanged it with the head of the chrysanthemum doll. But why? Why indeed? Echoed Kindaichi. Whatever for? I wish I knew. It was the chief of Nasu Police Department. His name was Tachibana, a pot-bellied man of rather short but imposing build, with a small grizzled head on top of his stocky body. His nickname was Badger. Chief Tachibana and Kindaichi were already acquainted, for as the reader knows, our detective was questioned by the Nasu police after Toichiro Wakabayashi was murdered. Chief Tachibana had subsequently made inquiries to the Tokyo police regarding Kindaichi's background and must have received answers exceedingly flattering to the private investigator. For ever since, though still half in doubt, he had regarded this inconsequential-looking, stuttering man of smallish build and uncombed hair with curiosity and certain awe. Kindaichi looked once again at the ghastly chrysanthemum dolls, the now headless Tankai, standing like an evil spirit in the shadowy depth of the back of the stage, Take's grotesque head lying at Tankai's feet, and what was more, beside them, the dolls resembling Sahe and Tamayo, and even Kyo and Tomo, decked out in kimonos of colorful chrysanthemums and standing prim and proper and aloof. The dismal sound of raindrops striking the oil paper of the latticed awning provided accompaniment to the unearthly scene. Kindaichi wiped the perspiration that had risen to his brows. So where's the body? What's happened to the body from the neck down? We are looking for it right now. It shouldn't be far off. As you can see, the chrysanthemum garden set has not been disturbed much, so the crime scene must have been committed elsewhere. If we can find that. The Chief Tachibana stopped in mid-sentence, for he saw several detectives hastening noisily towards him. When one of them ran up and whispered something in his ear, the chief lifted his eyebrow sharply and then quickly turned to Kindaichi. We have found the crime scene. Come with us. With the chief and his men leading the way, Kindaichi and Furudate followed, walking shoulder to shoulder. Mr. Furudate? Yes? Who first found that Take's head? It was Monkey. Monkey? Kindaichi looked apprehensive. Yes. Once every morning, Monkey goes around the grounds, tending to the chrysanthemums. But this morning when he came to the garden, well, you saw what he found. So he called me immediately. It must have been a little past 9.
When I heard, I rushed here at once and found an unbelievable commotion. All the members of the clan were gathered in front of the chrysanthemum, and Takeko was crying and screaming like she had gone mad. But then, of course, who could blame her? What about Matsuko and Kyo? Oh yes, they were there too. But as soon as they saw Take's head, they went straight to their quarter without saying a word. I tell you, I have trouble dealing with those people. Kyo's face is always hidden behind the mask, and Matsuko, as you know, is so strong-minded she hardly ever lets her emotions show. I haven't had the faintest idea what they felt when they saw Take's head. Kindaichi remained pondering the situation in silence, but soon, as if remembering something, said, "By the way, that scroll, the one with Kyo's handprint, could it be that Take had that scroll on him last night? Oh no! They gave that to me for safekeeping. It's right here in my portfolio." Furudate tapped the portfolio under his arm and continued, suddenly in raspy voice, "Mr. Kindaichi, are you thinking that Take was killed on the account of the scroll?" Kindaichi did not answer but said, "Did the members of the Inugami clan all know that you had the scroll in your possession?" "Yes, except for Matsuko and Kyo. It was after those two had left that we had a discussion and decided that I should keep the scroll." "So, Matsuko and Kyo did not know." "That's right. Unless someone told them." "Told them?" "No. I think we can put that possibility aside. After all, they had just had a very emotional confrontation with the others, haven't they?" "Yes, that's true. But I can't believe they would." By this time, Chief Tachibana and his men had reached the boathouse by the lake. It was where Kindaichi, in the boat rowed by Monkey, had first arrived in the Inugami estate on the day Sahei's will had been read. The boathouse was a rectangular, box-like building made completely of reinforced concrete, and its roof had been converted into a covered observation deck. The chief and his troop climbed up the narrow staircase leading to the observation deck. Kindaichi and Furudate followed, but as soon as they reached to the top of the stairs, Kindaichi's eyes widened at what he saw. There was a round wicker table surrounded by 5 or 6 matching stairs, one of which lay overturned. A huge pool of blood covered a part of the floor. There was no mistake. The murder had been committed here. The body, however, was nowhere to be found. The chrysanthemum brooch. Chief, the crime was committed here. The murderer must have killed Take, cut off his head, and then thrown the body into the lake from here, see? There was indeed a thin red trail that led from the pool of blood to the edge of the observation deck. Following the trail and standing at the edge, one could see the waters of the lake directly below, as the rain carved dismal circles on the waves lapping against the wall of the building. "Damn!" Chief Tachibana muttered in disgust as he peered into the water. "We are going to have to drag to the lake. Is it very deep around here?" "No, it's not that deep, but look over there," said the chief, pointing to a spot on the lake about 50 meters away. "There where you see those large wave patterns. Those are called the 7 cauldrons, and it's a hot spring bubbling up from the bottom. It causes a slow but constant circular current in this part of the lake, so that if the lake were thrown into the water from here, it has no doubt been carried off far away by now." Just then, one of the detectives came up to Tachibana. Chief, we found this." It was a gold chrysanthemum-shaped brooch, about 3 centimeters in diameter, with a large ruby in the middle. "We found it over there, near the overturned wicker chair." Chief Tachibana and Kindaichi heard a strange cry escape through Date's lips. Whirling around in surprise, they found him staring intently at the brooch. "Mr. Furudate, do you know anything about this brooch?" Furudate took out his handkerchief and hurriedly wiped his brow. "Well, yes. Who is it? Whose is it? Pressed Tachibana. I think it belongs to Tamayo. Tamayo? Kindaichi took a step forward. But even if the brooch belongs to Tamayo, that doesn't necessarily mean she's connected to the murder, does it? She could have dropped it long before last night. But what? But that can't be. I clearly remember her having this brooch on last night. Yes, clearly, last night. As I was leaving, I accidentally bumped into her, and the brooch got caught on my vest. That's why I remember it so well. Furudate nervously wiped the sweat from his neck as the chief and Kindaichi exchanged meaningful glances. About what time was that? Oh, a little before 10. It was just about when I was leaving. So Tamayo must have come to the observation deck after the little incident with Furudate. But what business could she have done here at such a late hour? Just then, they heard footsteps from the direction of stairs, and up popped Monkey's ugly face. Mr. Furudate? Yes, what do you want? Furudate approached Monkey and exchanged a few words with him, but returned immediately. Matsuko wants to see me, he said. I'll be right back. Alright, said Chief Tachibana. Oh, and if you're going, would you mind asking Tamayo to come here? I'll do that. Furudate departed, but the monkey showed no signs of leaving and remained standing midway up the flight of stairs, glancing nervously around the observation deck. Monkey, is there something else you want? Yeah, well, something a little strange happened. Strange? asked Chief Tachibana. Yeah, one of the boats is gone. A boat? Yeah. Every morning I go and look around the grounds and checking to see everything's alright. But this morning, as soon as I got up, I came downstairs and the sluice gate was open. I remember closing the gate for sure yesterday before it got dark. So I thought something strange going on, and I looked inside the boathouse, and sure enough, one of the 3 boats was gone. Chief Tachibana and Kindaichi looked at each other in surprise. So you're saying that someone must have rowed out the boat during the night? Don't know that. I just know one of the boats is gone. And the sluice gate was open. Monkey nodded sullenly. Instinctively, Kindaichi looked back towards the lake, but there was nothing like a boat anywhere on the splattered waters. Do your boats have some kind of mark on them? Yeah, they all have the Inugami printed in black on the side. At the chief whispered command, 3 detectives rushed down the stairs, no doubt in search for the missing boat. Monkey, thank you very much. If you notice anything else, please let me know. Monkey bowed awkwardly and padded down the staircase. Chief Tachibana turned towards Kindaichi. Mr. Kindaichi, what do you think? Do you think the murderer put Take's headless corpse into the boat and transported it somewhere? I'm not sure, said Kindaichi, looking out over the misty lake. If so, that would mean the murderer is an outsider, since whoever it is has left in the boat and hasn't come back. Not necessarily. The murderer could have weighted the body and thrown it into the water, row it to a shore somewhere, and then hike over the hills to return here. But that would be awfully dangerous. If the killer is going to put the severed head so ostentatiously on a display like that, there's no reason to take such a risk hiding the body. I guess that's so. Chief Tachibana stood staring abstractly at the gruesome pool of blood, but all at once shook his head fiercely. Mr. Kindaichi, I don't like this. Why decapitate the body? Why put the head on the chrysanthemum doll? I don't like it at all. It just gives me chills. Just then, Tamayo came up the stairs. She was pale and her eyes wide and sharp, but her loveliness was unchanged. No, her frightened, somewhat helpless air even seemed to enhance her beauty. A tender, melancholy beauty like that of a fragile flower languishing in the rain. Tachibana coughed slightly and then said, "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Tamayo glanced at the grisly pool of blood and grew wide-eyed in fear for an instant, but quickly averted her face, sat down awkwardly in one of the wicker chairs. I asked you to come because I wanted to know if you recognize this brooch. When she saw the chrysanthemum brooch in the palm of Tachibana's hand, Tamayo stiffened for a moment. Yes, I do. It's it's mine. I see. And do you have any idea where you have misplaced it? Yes, probably last night. Where? I believe it must have been in here. Tachibana and Kindaichi quickly exchanged glances. Then, you came here last night? Yes. Around what time? About 11, I think. What made you come to a place like this at such a late hour? Tamayo was kneading on her handkerchief in her hand, kneading and kneading until it seemed like she would tear the cloth into two. Listen, now that we have come this far, why don't you just let it out? Tell us everything. Exactly why did you come up here? Seeming to come to a decision, Tamayo lifted her face with determination. To tell the truth, I met with Take here last night. There was something I wanted to discuss with him in private. The blood had drained completely from her cheeks. Tachibana threw another glance at Kindaichi. That is the end of today's reading, actually. I think. Let me see. Yeah. That is the end for today. Because I have separated them into 3 sections already. And yeah, it is definitely a cliffhanger for you guys. Haha. But yeah. Come back on Wednesday for more. It's a very... The way I separated it is quite balanced, I feel. So I don't know. Let me see how long is the next chapter. I'll read one more chapter. I think I can read one more chapter. Okay, I'll read one more chapter, okay? The fingerprint on the watch. You met with Take here last night? Yeah, let me drink water, sorry. All at once, a slight hint of suspicion flickered in Chief Tachibana's eyes. Kindaichi too frowned with a puzzled look and stared at Tamayo's pale, bloodless profile, sphinx-like in its inscrutability. What business did you have with him? Or no, I suppose it was Take who asked you to come. No, that's not right, Tamayo stated crisply. I was the one who asked him to come and meet me here about 11 last night. Having said that, she turned her eyes hesitantly towards the surface of the lake. The wind must have picked up, for the rhythm of the rain beating on the water grew more violent and chaotic, portending a storm. Tachibana and Kindaichi looked at one another again. Oh, I see. Tachibana cleared his throat with effort. And what business did you have with him? You said that you had something you wanted to discuss with him in private. Yes, that's correct. There was something I wanted to tell Take in secret, without letting anyone else know. And that was? Tamayo suddenly turned her eyes from the lake back to the chief's face. Yes, with all that has happened, I will tell you everything frankly and honestly, she said with a steady gaze, as if she had made up her mind and began a curious tale. Mr. Inugami was very good to me. Ever since I was a child, he always treated me with love and kindness, as if I was his granddaughter. I'm sure both of you know that already. Indeed, Kindaichi and Tachibana knew it very well. The old man's affection for Tamayo was obvious from the contents of his will. Seeing the two men nod in silence, Tamayo continued, a faraway look coming to her eyes. One time, Mr. Inugami gave me a watch. Not recently. It was when I was still in pigtails. A Tavani's pocket watch, a hunter that Mr. Inugami had. It wasn't a lady's watch, but child that I had fallen in love with it for some reason, and whenever it was near Mr. Inugami, I would ask him to take it out of his pocket and let me touch it. Then one day, he laughed and said, "If you like it so much, Tamayo, I'll give it to you. It's a man's watch though, so you won't be able to carry it with you when you grow up. But, yes, I know, you can give it as a gift to the man you marry. Until then, you take good care of it, alright? He was joking, of course, but saying that he gave the pocket watch to me. Chief Tachibana and Kindaichi, looking confused, stared at Tamayo's profile. What connection did this watch have with the events of last night? Both men, however, hesitated to interrupt her. Instead, they waited silently, for they saw that despite the grisly situation they were involved in, a look of indescribably tender love had flooded over Tamayo's brows, eyes, and lips as she spoken about the late Sahe. Still, with a dreamy look, Tamayo continued her strange tale. I was so thrilled. I always kept the watch with me, even putting it by my pillow when I went to bed. Tick-tock, tick-tock. I listened to that clear, sharp sound. Was such a delight. I treasured it, but being a child, I would sometimes damage it, winding it too tight or accidentally getting it wet. When that time, it was always Kiyo who fixed it for me. At the mention of the name, Tamayo's fairy tale of long ago gradually began to acquire an air of reality. The two men's expression became more tense. Kiyo and I are only 3 years apart, but he was always very skillful with his hands, even as a boy, and he loved working with mechanical things. He was very good at doing things like assembling a radio or building an electric train, so repairing my watch was a piece of cake for him. Tamayo, did you break your watch again? Shame on you, he would scold me. But when he saw me looking so sad, he would say, Okay, I'll fix it for you. It will be ready tomorrow. I'll fix it for you tonight. And the next day, he would place the watch in my hand as good as new, always smiling and laughing and teasingly saying, Tamayo, you have to take better care of your watch. After all, you're going to give it to the man you marry when you grow up, aren't you? You have to treat it with more tender loving care, he would say, poking my cheek gently with his forefinger. As she told her tale, Tamayo's cheek colored ever so slightly, and her beautiful eyes glistened more brightly, as if they had become moist. Kindaichi pictured Kiyo with his sinister rubber mask. Today, there was no trace of the past in that hidden, disfigured face, but the features of a mask that had been made identical to the former self were indescribably handsome even in their eeriness. His photograph in the life of Sahe Inugami too showed that Kiyo had been an extremely attractive young man. No doubt he had inherited his good looks from Sahe, who had even aroused homoerotic passions in Tamayo's late grandfather Daini Nonomiya. The episode Tamayo related had probably taken when she was still in elementary school and Kiyo in junior high. What emotions had stirred between this young, doll-like pair? And what plans had Sahe made for them as he watched them? Kindaichi suddenly remembered the scene with Monkey's chrysanthemum dolls. In the kabuki play Chrysanthemum Garden, the former General Kiichi presented the young lord and warrior Ushiwaka, who had entered his household disguised as a servant, not only with his secret book of military tactics, but with his daughter Princess Minazuru as well. Among Monkey's chrysanthemum dolls, Kiichi had been made to look like Sahe, while the young hero Ushiwaka resembled Kiyo and Princess Minazuru Tamayo. Did this mean Sahe had plans?
Stretch!
Okay. Okay. Does it mean Sahe had plans? Plans. Long ago to make Kiyo and Tamayo husband and wife, and to bestow upon them not the secret book of military, but as in the play, but the axe, zither, and chrysanthemum, the right to inherit the Inugami fortune. Of course, it was Monkey, not Sahe, who had made the chrysanthemum dolls, so Kindaichi could not be certain that they reflected Sahe's wishes. Besides, Monkey was not a man of normal intelligence. Could it not be, however, that with the God-given instincts of such individuals, instincts that are so often sharper than those of ordinary people, Monkey has subconsciously guessed Sahe's feelings, or perhaps fond of Monkey's naive directness, had Sahe secretly told him his plans? If that were so, then Monkey might have made the dolls as a comment on the Inugami clan's recent situation. Laying aside the question of Sahe's impossible intentions, therefore, Monkey, for one, must have felt that Kiyo should be Tamayo's husband and the three heirlooms should be presented to them and them alone. But Kiyo was no longer the Kiyo of yesteryear. Those handsome features had been totally destroyed. Remembering that horribly mutilated, disgusting mass of flesh she had seen that day, Kindaichi felt a shudder of horror and was overwhelmed by the hopeless gloom. His meandering thoughts, however, were soon interrupted when Tamayo, after a long period of silence, once again began to speak. During the war, something went wrong with my watch again, but by then Kiyo, who had always had fixed it for me, was no longer in this house. He had been drafted and fighting on the battlefield somewhere in the Southeast Asia. Tamayo's voice faltered for a bit, but quickly clearing her throat, she continued, I just couldn't bear to take that watch to a shop to be repaired. For one thing, I had heard that time to time that such a fine watch, there was a danger that it would switch the movement for something inferior. The other reasons was that I had come to feel that only person who should repair the watch was Kiyo. I didn't want to hand it to anyone, even just for a short while. So for a long time, the watch has not kept accurate time, but since Kiyo had finally returned, Tamayo hesitated a moment, but quickly seemed to urge herself on, and seems to have gotten quite settled now. I took the watch to him several days ago and asked him to repair it. Kindaichi suddenly became very interested, as was his habit. Then, when thus aroused, he began enthusiastically scratching his head. He did not yet understand what exactly Tamayo wanted to say, or what thought lay in her mind. Nevertheless, there was something that was exciting him intensely, and he continued scratching his head with wild abandon. And Kiyo repaired the watch for you? Tamayo slowly shook his head. No. He took it in his hands and looked at it for a while, but he said he didn't feel like repairing it then and would do it some other day. Then he handed the watch back to me. Having spoken thus, Tamayo fell silent. Chief Tachibana and Kindaichi, expecting more, watched Tamayo's face with bated breath, but she remained turned to the lake and seemed to loath to open her mouth again. Tachibana looked confused and scratched the side of his head with his little finger. I see. But what does this have to do with the events last night? Tamayo did not answer the question, but abruptly turned her account into another direction. I'm sure you both know what happened at this villa last night. There was a big fuss because Take and Tomo brought back Kiyo's handprint from Nasu's shrine and tried to use it as a... What's the right word? Tamayo shuddered slightly. Evidence? Yes, though that's an unpleasant word. As evidence to check Kiyo's identity. For some reason, Mrs. Matsuko obstinately refused to let Kiyo give them his handprint and all Take's and Tomo's effort came to a naught. But then I suddenly remembered something. The other day, as I told you, when I asked Kiyo to repair my watch and he refused after returning to your room, though I just happened to open the lid and saw Kiyo's right thumbprint pressed clearly on the back of it. Kindaichi suddenly jerked as if struck by lightning. Yes, this is what has been exciting him so intensely. Kindaichi again began furiously scratching his head this way and that, his hair now a tangled mass. Chief Tachibana, appalled, stared at him for a while, but eventually turned back to Tamayo and said, But how could you be certain that was Kiyo's handprint? A fingerprint? Stupid question. Wasn't it obvious? Tamayo spoke as if Kiyo's fingerprint had been pressed there accidentally, and he later discovered it accidentally. But how could that be true? No doubt she had planned ahead and set a trap for Kiyo, intending from the first to get his fingerprints somewhere on the watch. Yes, this is what has been exciting Kindaichi so intensely. What an intelligent and at the same time, what a cunning woman Tamayo was. I don't think there could be any mistake. I wiped and polished the watch before taking taking it to Kiyo, and the only two persons who had handled the watch were he and myself. Since the print is not mine, I'm right, Kindaichi thought. Tamayo had wiped the watch clean, planning to obtain Kiyo's fingerprint. How ingenious she was, though, to think of the back of the lid. What's better place to preserve a fingerprint? Tachibana, too, finally seems convinced. I see. And? Yes, and Tamayo kept searching for words. And seeing Mrs. Natsuko's attitude last night, I knew we could not hope to obtain Kiyo's handprint anytime soon. But to leave the situation as it was would mean making Take and Tomo, as well as their parents, even more suspicious. So when I remembered Kiyo's thumbprint on the watch, I felt it best to make things certain as quickly as possible. And at the risk of being a little presumptuous, I decided to ask Take to compare it with the handprint on the scroll. I see. And you asked Take to come here to speak to him about that? Yes. That's about 11 last night? It was exactly 11 when I left my room. I knew that if Monkey found out, he would insist on coming along. I couldn't have that, so I first retired into my bedroom and then waited until 11 just to sneak out. Just a minute, Kindaichi interjected for the first time. Could you please tell us what happened then in detail? If it's exactly 11 o'clock when you left your room, then that means it must have been about 2 or 3 minutes past 11 when you arrived here. Was Take already here? Yes, he was. He was standing by there at the edge, looking out over the lake and smoking a cigarette. When you came up the stairs to this observation deck, was there anyone else about? I don't know. I didn't notice anyone, but it was so cloudy and dark last night. I don't think I would have noticed even if someone else has been there. I see. Then you told Take about the watch. Yes, and the watch, I gave it to him. He was very happy and said he would ask Mr. Furudate to bring the scroll over first thing tomorrow and compare the prints. What did Take do with the watch? I think he put it into his vest pocket. Since Take's body had not been discovered yet, however, they had no way of knowing whether it was still there. And about how many minutes did you remain here talking? No more than 5, I would think. I didn't want to stay alone with Take in such a place like this for very long, so I said what I had to say as quickly as possible. I see. So you went separate ways about 7 or 8 minutes past 11? Who left first? I did. Then Take remained behind alone. What was he doing? Tamayo suddenly flushed. For a moment, she stared straight ahead with blazing eyes, crumpling her handkerchief in her hand. Suddenly, he shook her head fiercely as if angry, said, Take acted very rudely towards me. As I started to leave, he suddenly pounced on me, and I think it must have been then that I lost my brooch. If Monkey hadn't come just then, I'd just know what would have happened to me. Tachibana and Kindaichi exchanged glances. So Monkey was here too. Yes, I thought I had managed to sneak out without him noticing, but he had found out and followed me here. But I'm so thankful now that he did. If he hadn't come... What did Monkey do to Take? I'm not sure. After all, Take had me in his arms, and I was desperate trying to free myself. But all of a sudden, Take cried out and fell. Yes, that was when the chair overturned. Take fell on the floor. I looked up, and there was Monkey standing there. He helped me, and I ran away from this place as fast as I could. Take was still on the floor on his knees, muttering abuses. I see. Then the murderer must have come after that, killed Take, and cut off his head. Did you notice anyone else when you were leaving? No, I didn't. Like I said, it was pitch black outside. Besides, I was so upset. Tamayo's tale had come to an end. Well, thank you very much, Chief Tachibana had said. I'm sorry to have troubled you. At his words, Tamayo stood up, but Kindaichi stopped her. Just a moment. One more question. What do you think about that masked man? Do you think that's really Kiyo, or... The blood drained from Tamayo's cheek. For a long time she stood staring fixedly at Kindaichi's face, but soon answered in an emotionless voice. Of course. I'm convinced it's Kiyo. Take and Tomo's suspicions are absurd. Yet, Tamayo had deliberately set out to trick him into giving her his fingerprint. Thank you very much. That's all then. Tamayo acknowledged Kindaichi with her eyes and descended from the observation deck. Almost simultaneously, Furudate returned. Oh, you're still here. Matsuko is asking all of you to come to the house. Any particular reason? Yes, said Furudate, a slightly bewildered expression on his face. It's about, the handprint. She says that she wants to have Kiyo make a handprint in front of everyone. That is the end today's reading. I can't read anymore because if I read more, I'm gonna go over. Then the next time I won't have enough content to read. I think we are very well. Yeah, all's good. We have 2 more reading sessions for this book. So far so good. Who done it? Who done it, guys? Oh shit. That is the end of today's reading session. Thank you so much for being here today. To everyone who carded.
Oh yeah, we did it.
We did it. Yes, we did it. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Deanne, for being here. Thank you. Oh, Magnus is here as well. Hey, thank you. Thank you, Ophelia. Thank you, Tuna, and Deanne and Ophelia stayed since I started reading. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Swiss Roll. Thank you, Ando, in the stream. Thank you, Cardinal. Even Cardinal already ran away. Thank you, Jin, if Jin's still here. Sorry, I had like some fucking. The end is always dead. Who done it? Who killed the end? You're gonna find out now. Oh my god. Oh no, Gabriel! I'm so sorry. The end. Close the party finder now. People are coming in. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. The reading session has ended for today, but you can come back on next Wednesday, and not this Wednesday for the next reading. I'm so sorry. You can rewatch my VOD. I always keep my VODs. Thank you so much. The end. Close the party finder now. Okay, it's gone. No, I'm so sorry, Gabriel. Yes. We have VOD and we have YouTube. You can join our Discord, and there is a Discord channel that has listed all of the previous readings that I have done since last year. And I've been doing this for a year. The other day I was checking how many books I've read. I've read 18 books. And that's like, I took so many breaks in between. There was one time I didn't read for like 3 months, I think. I think this is the 19th book. I have so many more books to read, guys. Yeah. I don't think it will ever, I don't know. Will Noodible ever end? What do you guys think? Yes, join my Discord. I know it's annoying to have so many Discord channels to keep track, but my Discord channel is very, very sad, very, very quiet. I only ever make announcement in it, and so that people can join in to read to the reading session. So basically, like if you don't follow me on Twitch, if you're on Discord, and if you didn't mute us, you will get an announcement when I start reading, and you can come in here, or you can go to my live stream. You don't have to come in here in person into this event space, because I know some people like to play the game while listening, so that's completely fine. Don't worry about it. There's no pressure. Yeah. So, yeah. When you come in, there will be like a channel that's like called Noodible
Noodible's playlist, so you can see like a very a lot of playlists. You can I'll put them all. I save them all up on Twitch, but it's a lot harder to find a VOD on Twitch than YouTube. So I ported everything to YouTube as well, so that it's easier to find on YouTube. Definitely easier to find on YouTube. I think, um, and yeah, yeah. So you can catch up on Inugami Curse. It's not bad. I think it's like very typical whodunit kind of book, but Japanese whodunit. Uh, uh, we'll we'll continue on Wednesday and Friday. I have reading session Noodibles on every. Should I change to 12 o'clock, you guys? Instead of 11? What do you guys think? Because I realized that whenever I start at 11, it's like nobody's really here. And then. But I don't want to read until so late. Like, I always read like 2-3 hours. No, I'm going to stick to 11. I'm sorry. You guys can watch my VODs. Yeah, I've been doing it for a year. I started around this time, I think, or last month. Starting around about March of last month. Yeah, Dian, my manager over there, is the one who told me to start doing it on Twitch, and in game. I have an extensive amount of VODs for you to catch up. So, just switch it on. Nah, I started 11, so it's not that early, to be honest. Like, I want to do, like, I don't know. My whole point is that I want to do reading session around the time when people are working or studying, so that I can be like the background sound for them. I don't know. Like, that's my intention. My intention is just to be a background sound. Kindaichi case file. Yeah, this is a Kindaichi case file. There are a lot more books. So I feel very interested in this writer's books. I might go and get his books next time. This book that I'm reading, I borrowed it from my friend. The reason why I'm reading it right now is because I want to finish reading it so that I can return it to her, because I've like borrowed a bunch of books from her since last year. So yeah. This is interesting, but it's like very typical whodunit. But I enjoy reading it, so I might get more. But after this book, it's going to be like a crazy Kazuo Ishiguro, Natsume Soseki, Kazuo Ishiguro, Natsume Soseki, Kazuo Ishiguro, Natsume Soseki books readings. And Kazuo, then there's so many Kazuo Ishiguro books, so yeah. Yeah, guys. Yeah. Yep. Thank you so much once again for being here with me today. Yeah. We're gonna continue this Inugami Curse on Wednesday, 11 a.m. GMT plus 8. Come in if you can. Don't like catch up on VODs if you can't come in at the same time. What else? What else I want to say? I'm trying to keep up with a proper schedule of weekly reading, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I need to be more disciplined, and I hope that I can stay disciplined. And Dian, want to do Unreal? Dian, we got one last day before tomorrow reset. Dian, you said yesterday, and you didn't come in. This is private, but Dian, Unreal. Yeah, okay. I'll sit here and wait for you to come back in later. I need to eat anyway. It's lunchtime. Guys, it's lunchtime for me. I'm gonna go. Thank you. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do it tonight. Sure. Have fun. Yeah. No problem. No pressure. Just kidding. Right, anyway, thank you so much everyone for joining my reading session today. I really appreciate it for everyone who turned up on stream. Hey, bye, Cicero. Turn up on stream. Turn up in game. Fishball. Fishball, which one is you? Wait. Gabriel, right? God, Jesus Christ. Oh, Ando. Okay, if you see Diane's if you see Diane's party finder, Diane, Ando, just join, yeah. Cause I never open a party finder myself, cause I don't want to trap people. I want to trap people behind Diane's party finder, you know. I want to trap people behind the ends, you know, the end, inside the ends party finder. I don't want to start a party finder myself, and then I trap people, and then people will start saying that, oh my god, avoid that Ariana Nuna's party finder because she's terrible at raiding. Anyways, yes. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, Gabriel, wake up earlier. 11 a.m. Huh? Okay. Let's eat lunch, everyone. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Sorry, not tomorrow. I'll see you guys on Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. GMT plus 8. For those who wants to catch up on this VOD, it's going to be available later today or immediately after the broadcast ends. But I always port everything to YouTube. It's easier to watch there. So feel free, follow me on Twitch, follow me on YouTube, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord for alerts and stuff. I'll see you guys. And with that, I'm going to send you guys off with my favorite song in the world. Have a good day, everyone.
Have you ever had a dream that you could go do you wanna go do
Have a good Monday and have a smooth week ahead. Bye bye. Thank you so much for listening. Bye. ありがとうございました。